holiday season may be coming to a close, but there's still plenty of time to make it a magical one. Ring in the new year with something stunning and timeless from Diamonds Direct. Start the new year with a celebration of your love, or even a celebration of yourself. Whether you're shopping for the perfect wedding bands, a beautiful pair of diamond studs that were missing from under your tree, or the engagement ring of their dreams, Diamonds Direct has just what you're wishing for. This year, make your New Year's resolution to shop smarter by shopping direct. Making a decision on where to make your next jewelry purchase has never been easier. At Diamonds Direct, you're guaranteed to get an extraordinary value, ironclad warranties, and the white glove service that
Right back to more of it. It's BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN.
I've seen a lot this season. This is a stunning defensive performance by the Detroit Lions.
Listen, it's not you, it's me. That's what I wanted to say last night to Sam Darnold. I wanted to apologize to him. This is my fault. If you're a Vikings fan today, Andrew Marsh specifically, I apologize. This is all on me. Nobody else deserves to take any blame. This isn't on Kevin O'Connell. This isn't on Flores. This isn't on Sam Darnold or Justin Jefferson. No. Brandon Kiley in St. Louis, Missouri is the one that deserves to take all the blame for what happened last night to the Minnesota Vikings. Alongside Tanner Hendrickson and Alex Ferrario, I'm Brandon Kiley. Alex and myself, we're broadcasting from home today. I don't know if you guys have been outside. I don't want to go outside. Alex doesn't want to go outside. So we're going to be doing this thing from our home studio. So if it sounds a little different than it normally does, that is why. If you want to check us out on YouTube, you can do exactly that. At youtube.com/101ESPNSTL. The cams are always presented by the Air Alliance team. T-Bone, we decided to go ahead and sacrifice him. He can go into the studio, so he is locking things down for us over there. T-Bone, how's everything going in the studio today?
Oh, it's nice here. You know, it is kind of apocalyptic feeling because there's nobody in the building today. You know, I was just by my lonesome, you know, just walking around the halls, doing whatever I want to do.
T-Bone, at one point in your journey in, did you just think to yourself, man, all these people are soft, not wanting to leave their house and go to the studio. I can handle this snow.
Yeah, you know, about the moment I got in the car or started cleaning off the car, let me tell you, because that took about 30 minutes yesterday and had the ice pellets smacking me in the face, you know. But I am a champion, unlike the Minnesota Vikings. I bite kneecaps off like Dan Campbell would want, and I showed up to the office today like a champ.
All right, so let's talk it over. Lions win last night on on Sunday Night Football, rather, 31-9, a game that represented something that looked like what you would typically see on Thursday Night Football. Alex, I'm mad at myself because all year long, I said something very simple. I said, I don't believe in Sam Darnold. I don't believe that he's going to be able to come up in a big moment and have that clutch gene that everybody's looking for. I always assumed there was going to be a defensive coordinator when the game started to really matter that would be able to game plan for him and make him look the way that he has for the vast majority in his career. And then last week, I reversed course. He convinced me, all right, this is a me problem, not a Sam Darnold problem. I need to start watching the games in a better way. And I need to give him the credit that he is clearly due. Well, I reversed course. I picked the Vikings in our Pick'em Challenge. I picked the Vikings in the Fast Lanes Pick'em Challenge, and it came back to haunt me in both of them because I trusted Sam Darnold, and that's on me. That's a me problem, not a him problem. He had a 17 QBR last night. That's on a scale of 1 to 100, which means 83% of the games that you'd see from a quarterback were better than the game that you saw last night from Sam Darnold. He was terrible. The Lions did exactly what I expected them to do offensively. I knew they would get theirs, but Alex, I thought the Vikings would be able to get some as well, And they could do nothing all night offensively, and it all revolved back to Sam Darnold's incompetence, honestly, at the quarterback position last night.
Yeah, some of those throws by him, I mean, it looked like he was seeing ghosts out there like we typically see from Sam Darnold. I mean, he was throwing balls 5 yards up in front of the receivers where they had no chance to get after it, BK. And I mean, if you're going to take blame, I'm going to take blame, because I was the same guy that you were that said, like, hey, as much as I don't like Sam Darnold, he's backing it up. But when the moments are the biggest, when the bright shine the lightest, as BK likes to say, Sam Darnold trickled down his leg. And like, his history is doing that. Like, look at his history in the month of January as a quarterback. He's 1-6 with a 59% completion percentage. Like, he is not good when his team needs him the most. So that was just more of assurance for me of watching Sam Darnold this season and saying, yeah, it's an incredible season by Sam Darnold. But you know what? None of those games mattered as much as last night did against the Detroit Lions when you needed Sam Darnold to be at his best. The defense did everything they needed you to do. Aaron Jones was trying to scrap his way for more yards. Justin Jefferson was trying to make plays. The problem was the quarterback. And guess what? When it gets into the first round, T-Bone texted us last night, and I know he's the big Rams honk, BK, but T-Bone said any of these teams that lose in this game are going to lose to the Rams. Now, I don't buy it with the Lions. I think they would have found a way to beat the Rams. I 100% buy it. I don't know if they're going to be able to find a way to win in the playoffs because Sam Darnold isn't a big game moment quarterback.
That's why I said last week when we talked about this, you know, BK was like, well, what defense do you trust to stop Sam Darnold? No, it's not about if I trust that defense. It's more about, can Sam Darnold live up to big moments? And last night, he clearly didn't. Because I thought that game, and look, I've seen a lot of the reaction of, oh, the Lions, look at that defense. They're going to be fine when they get to the playoffs. Man, I thought that game last night told you more about Sam Darnold and the Vikings than it did about the Lions. Because I'm still putting the Lions on upset watch when we get to the divisional round 2 weeks from now. But right now, for the Minnesota Vikings, there should be some serious concern because Sam Darnold was seeing ghosts last night. That cover zero look had him confused all night long. And I can tell you right now, Sean McVay is going to bring that to him next week and in that playoff game on Monday night. So I think the Vikings, they learned a lot about Sam Darnold in that game. I don't think you're going to see him change between now and Monday, and he's going to show up and perform in the big game in the playoffs. I think they're going to have to try and establish the run because I don't think they can rely on Sam Darnold to be the guy now that we're in crunch time.
So I think you make a good point there, T-Bone, is it's not about necessarily like the defensive talent that you would expect to shut down Sam Darnold. It's about the defensive coordinator because it's about changing up the looks and making him uncomfortable back there. And that's exactly what we saw them be able to do. Dude, Aaron Glenn deserves a ton of credit for what the Lions were able to do yesterday. They lost another corner. Like, I think long term, we might view last night's game as a bit of an outlier for the Lions, because if they go up against one of the better quarterbacks in the NFC's playoff race, I'm not sure that they look the way that they did last night for the Vikings. Like, I don't know that that defensive game plan works against Tampa Bay, for example, and that's against Baker Mayfield, who I think I just trust a little bit more in these situations than Sam Darnold. I don't know if those looks work against Jaden Daniels or against Jordan Love because they don't crumble under the pressure the way that Sam Darnold did last night. So it could be different once we get into the postseason. We'll see on that. For Darnold, like, you go up against a Vic Fangio defense, Aaron Glenn's defense, clearly as we saw last night, or Todd Bowles, or even the Rams, who will get a little funky with their defensive looks. It's not going to look pretty in those situations. So last night gave me a lot of pause about the Vikings as a playoff threat. Do you guys think they can get by the Rams?
No.
Like, are you going to be picking the Minnesota Vikings right now? If you look at the Vegas odds, the Vikings are a 1.5 point favorite. A team that this year won 14 games. They're on the road against the Rams in the wild card round, and they are a 1.5 point favorite in that one. Will you guys be picking the Vikings? As of today, this could change, obviously, by the time we get to Friday.
I'm not picking the Vikings. I can't pick the Vikings because it's Sam Darnold. If you're telling me you've got Matt Stafford on one side and Sean McVay versus Kevin O'Connell and Sam Darnold, and look, Kevin O'Connell, great head coach. I think he's been incredible this season. But it always comes back to the quarterback. I think the Rams' defense has improved over these last few weeks of how they've played and how they've performed. And like you just said, BK, it comes down to the defensive coordinator and their game plan. And what I saw against with the Vikings yesterday was they can't adjust. So, yeah, I would be taking the Rams. It's a home game. It's a big one for Sam Darnold, and you got to try and shake the demons from last night in this one. So, no, I'll be taking the Rams in that wild card matchup.
Yeah, I would go Rams as well because I trust Matt Stafford and Sean McVay to get it done when it comes to the playoffs. Look, I think Kevin O'Connell is one of the most underrated head coaches, and I don't even know if he's underrated anymore. I think he's now starting to get his flowers based on this season with Sam Darnold at the helm as his quarterback. But you got to take two to tango for me to trust you going into the playoffs. And the defenses, Minnesota's got a great defense. Rams has gotten better, as Alex had mentioned. That defense will give the Rams a chance, and it will allow that offense and Sean McVay and Matthew Stafford to game plan, give themselves a chance to get to like 24 points is what I think it's going to take. Sam Darnold, I don't know if he's going to be able to do that because we haven't seen it from him in these big game moments. So, yeah, I'm going to go with the LA Rams. I'm going with the guys that have been there, done that, and have gotten to a Super Bowl and won a Super Bowl together.
If you're telling me that it's going to be the first to 21, 24 points, that's what's going to win this, I'm not trusting Sam Darnold to get 21 points. Guys, I know, like, it was a big game. Sam Darnold peed down his leg. But that was against a team in Detroit that had nobody defensively, and they couldn't score a touchdown. And you're going to tell me now in the playoffs in L.A. against the Rams that I'm expecting Darnold to outplay Matt Stafford in that offense? No, man, I can't do that.
God, somebody on the text line from the 618, and by the way, you guys can get involved in the show today, 314-399-9646, that's the Air Comfort Service text line, said, so you're telling me the entire Vikings season was nothing more than a fluke?
No, but there's a difference, BK, between a regular season team and a postseason team.
There is, but we don't see teams win 14 games during the regular season typically, and then just be bad teams. The problem is, like, what is the recent comparison for a team like this that won this many games with this kind of a quarterback? Like, I'm not sure there is one. I'll read you guys the list of teams that have won 14 games since 2000. It's not that long of a list, so it's going to be pretty easy for us to go through this. The Chiefs and the Lions both did it this year. The Eagles did it this year. And then you go back to 2022. Chiefs and Eagles both did it. Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes. I trusted both of those guys more than me. Kansas City Chiefs back in 2020. Patrick Mahomes. Baltimore Ravens 2019. Lamar Jackson. New England Patriots did it like 12 different times over the stretch of Tom Brady's career. Carolina in 2015 with Cam Newton. Green Bay in 2011 with Aaron Rodgers. Indianapolis in 2009 with Peyton Manning. Like, teams that do this are almost always teams that have a really great quarterback at the position, and you can trust them once you get into the playoffs. So do I think it was all a fluke? No. I think he was a really good quarterback this year. I do think, though, once we get into these moments in the playoffs, things are different. Teams are game planning individually for you more so than they are for a 17-game regular season. So, yeah, I think things are going to be different in the playoffs. And, yes, I did trust Sam Darnold to beat the Lions last week, and it did not work out well. And, yes, I'm probably over-adjusting. But now I do think that the Rams, I would give them a real chance to beat them head-to-head, and I will probably be picking the Rams once we get to Sunday and then get into Monday and we pick that game. So that's the way that I'm leaning as well. Did anything change for you guys dramatically as you saw the way that the bracket is now laid out? We've got Chargers versus Texans, Steelers versus Ravens, Broncos versus Bills in the AFC. And in the NFC side of things, we've got Packers, Eagles, Commanders, Bucks, and Vikings, Rams. Did anything really significantly change for you guys as we saw the way that the bracket unfolded yesterday?
I don't think anything significantly changed for me. I think the excitement level for the NFC playoff bracket, BK, just got a little bit more intense. I originally thought we would see Commanders versus Eagles, and now that we're getting Packers versus Eagles and Commanders versus Bucks, sorry, Baker Mayfield, but I'm going to take the Commanders all day in that one. And so now you're setting up to potentially see a Commanders versus Eagles second round, and I think that's pretty exciting.
I think for me, it made me worry about the Lions' chances to get to the NFC Championship game based on the way that this is shaped up, because I look at the Commanders as a team that, what Alex just said, I think they can take down the Buccaneers in that matchup. And with that being said, they're the highest seed that I have winning moving forward, which means they're going to run into the Lions. And again, I just said this. I don't think the Lions defense, I don't think we learned anything new about them last night outside just Sam Darnold was not in the right element for a big-time game. So I would worry about the Detroit Lions' path that they would run into the Commanders because I think that offense can put up some points against them. Now, I don't know if that defense will be able to get enough stops, but their offense will at least give them a chance.
The thing that changed for me is, I can't believe I'm saying this. T-Bone's just going to be so insufferable if this happens. The thing that changed the most for me was about the Rams, dude. The Rams ended up drawing, I believe, the best matchup for them. Like, I would not have picked the Rams over the Washington Commanders or the Green Bay Packers. I wouldn't have done it. I would have picked both of those teams over the Rams, despite the fact that they were on the road.
Man, you love the Packers.
I do. You know how much I love the Packers.
They looked like trash this weekend.
They looked horrible. They also had their backup quarterback for the majority of the game.
Sure.
I will probably be picking the Rams against the Vikings going into this weekend. So once they do that, if they're able to accomplish that, I'll be curious to see where we get to with them matchup-wise in the second round. It's possible they get, like, the Bucks. And are we positive that the Bucks are a better team than the Rams? I think they're pretty similar in that regard. Like, we might be getting an LA Rams NFC Championship again.
Yeah.
That is in play this year. And I don't know how good the Rams are, but I think their draw ended up being pretty good. So that's the thing for me that probably changed the most. Otherwise, like, things kind of went according to plan in the AFC. Nothing really changed in a meaningful way. The Chargers are the 5 seed. The Steelers are the 6, but it doesn't really change much for me over there. I would have picked anybody over the Texans at this point in time. And by the way, the Chargers are favored over the Texans on the road right now, which is fascinating. But otherwise, man, the bracket pretty much sets up as we had anticipated going into the weekend. All right, with Tanner Hendrickson and Alex Ferrario, I'm Brandon Kiley. If you guys want to get involved in the show, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved with us. YouTube is available for you. The chat is off and running at youtube.com/101ESPN-STL. Coming up in about 15 minutes or so, we got to talk a little bit about the NFL's coaching carousel. It's already off and running, and we have an early surprise that is a part of it. A couple of them, actually. We'll get into that. Guys that are staying, guys that are going, coming up in 15 minutes. But coming up next, we do have to talk about the St. Louis Blues, who played pretty well on Friday night. I thought maybe their best game of the season. And then they once again failed to win 3 straight games. Why can't this team get over that hump? We'll ask Alex Ferrario his answer to that coming up next here on 101 ESPN.
T-Bone here, let me ask you this question. Have you played Pick 6 from DraftKings yet? If not, what are you waiting for as the NFL playoffs are here and time is running out? As the official daily fantasy sports partner of the NFL, DraftKings does fantasy sports like no one else. Pick 6 is available in most states, including here in Missouri, and you can play for better payouts on Pick 6. It's super easy to get started. Select 2 or more players and choose if they will have more or less of a stat like touchdowns, yardage, sacks, and more. This week, They've already got some stuff out for NFL wildcard weekend. I'm thinking less on Derrick Henry's 99.5 rushing yards and less on Russell Wilson's 212.5 passing yards. $10 on that, and I can win more than $40 on Pick 6. And DraftKings is making it even sweeter for first-timers. New Pick 6 customers will pay $5 and get $50 in Pick 6 credits. Win more cash on Pick 6. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app and use code 101WXOS. That's code 101WXOS for new customers to play $5, get $50 in Pick 6 credits. Only on DraftKings Pick 6. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Voids where prohibited. One per new customer. Bonus awards as non-withdrawable Pick 6 credits that expire in 30 days. Limited time offer. See terms at pick6.com. DraftKings.com/promos.
One you're going to love for your collection, and all you have to do is go to 101ESPN.com or visit 101ESPN, the mobile app. Register now to win that one-of-a-kind signed Jordan Kyrou female jersey.
This is exactly where you want to be, listening to us. It's BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN.
Get it in front, they shoot, they score! Jordan Kyrou gets it back for the Blues. It's 3-1. Sure, the Blues won't be shut out. They get it up to Fantilli. He shoots and scores, and now it's 4-1 Columbus. That one beats Hofer Blocker's side. Blues put it to the front of the net and score. That one hit off the post. Comes to the near side and pitching into the play to make the difference. Fowler's got another one. 13:05 to go, and they're right back in it. Jackets on the near side go to shoot it. They pick it up. They score. Unbelievable. A backhand shot by Voronkov over the glove of Hofer. It's 5-2. Defense and goaltending gone here in the third period for both teams.
That cannon surprised me, and I knew it was coming because it's the return from a loss. That's unbelievable. All right, with Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. You've got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. That is what it sounded like on Saturday night, as for the 7th consecutive time, the Blues had an opportunity to win a third straight game. And for the 7th consecutive time, Alex, they failed to do so. For whatever reason, this team just cannot seem to get over that hump. They win 2 in a row, they get that third opportunity, they find a way to lose that game. And most of these games are pretty close. They're like 3-2, 4-3, 1-goal games in one direction or the other. Well, just really in one direction. Unfortunately, that game on Saturday, Hofer had a tough one. He'd probably tell you the same thing. You got out special teams, and it just... They didn't have their best game there. Alex, why is this team failing so many times to get that third game in a row? What's happening?
You know, BK, if I have to kind of isolate it from that one game against the Columbus Blue Jackets versus the previous 6, because the previous 6, if you say, like, why does this team keep failing when it comes to that third consecutive win? Well, a lot of the times in the past, it's been because this team's offense is nowhere to be found. I was looking at this. So prior to the Columbus Blue Jackets, they were 0-5-1 in those that opportunity to win the third straight. And all but 2 of those 6 games were 1-goal losses. And we're talking the Blues scoring 2 goals, 1 goal, 2 goals, 2 goals. That was a game that you put 4 up against the Columbus Blue Jackets and just didn't get the proper goaltending. In the past, it's been, well, they're getting the goaltending, they're not getting the offense, and now they just didn't get the offense. It's one of those things that feels like it's more of a mental thing than anything. And talking with Braden Shen prior to that Winter Classic game, you know, I asked him if the Winter Classic was one of those jumping off points, and he said it can be. But he also said none of that matters until we start to string wins together. And he said we've got to get to 3, and then we get to 4, and then you get to 5, and hopefully you can go beyond that.
Glad to know Braden Shin knows how to count.
Exactly, but more than I do, to say the least. But that game just felt different for me than the other ones. The other ones, it was frustrating losses because you need to win. There's no more excuses. The Buffalo Sabres won, the Winnipeg Jets early on in the season. But that one against Columbus, it felt like they were making strides. They just didn't get the proper goaltending. And I'll make the 2018-2019 comp for everybody.
Oh,
Not because I think they're winning the Stanley Cup, BK, but just to put it into reference of new coach taking over, how long it takes to finally start to get the strings of victories together. Berube, of course, took over in the middle of November. That team, when they went on to win the Stanley Cup, didn't get their first 3-game win streak until games 41, 42, and 43, which was mid-January. So to put that into context for you, tomorrow night will be game 41, then 42, then 43. So sometimes these streaks take a little bit of time, but once you get over that benchmark, then you start to feel a little bit more confident in your game, and that one fell short for them.
Somebody on the text line makes a good point. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. Guys, they lost the game because of their horrendous finishing in the first period. They had a number of offensive chances in that first that they just weren't able to capitalize on. So there is some truth to that, but they gave up 6 goals. So they lost that game for more reasons than just their inability to finish in the first period. It goes well beyond that. That third period, dude,
yeah.
Both teams were going back and forth. There was no defense was completely optional in the third period.
Well, and goaltending was too. Like you had 5 goals scored in 3 minutes and 40 seconds. And I will push back a little bit on they were terrible at finishing. Man, Merzlikins made some really big-time saves. Like there was one that he made sprawling from post to post on a one-time shot by Jake Neighbors. Like that's a highlight reel save. So, yes, you need to finish in those situations, but I mean, there was a really good goaltender on the other side, which I know sounds like an excuse for a lot of people. That one it just felt like an anomaly, but the third period was the problem. And BK, I don't know about you, but yes, the Blues scored 4 goals and were unable to get that save. But, man, there were 3 goals that Joel Hofer gave up that you're thinking, wait a minute, what's going on here? There were 2 breakaway shots. It was a point-blank, nobody around him, and it just went right past Joel Hofer.
Yeah, and that's become a little bit of a theme. I mean, it's only a 2-game sample size, but his last 2 starts have not been great for Joel Hofer. Now, they've been like a week and a half apart because of the break over the Christmas break, and gave up 4 goals against Nashville, gave up 6 against Columbus. So that's 10 goals in total over his last 2 starts for him. Alex, the reason I bring this up is because on Friday we said, all right, let's get this back-to-back out of the way. Let's see kind of where you're at, and then we can determine, or the Blues will determine, but we can, assess from the outside looking in how you use your goalies moving forward. Because Benner was coming off of that great performance in the Winter Classic, and then he followed it up with a shutout against Ottawa. He was never going to get the back-to-back, nor should he. So you got an opportunity to Hofer to hold serve, at least. And he goes out there and gives up 6 goals against Columbus. So, with that being the backdrop, are we done with the goalie controversy thing? Is this still too early for you? Do you go 1-to-1? Like, how are you splitting up the usage, at least over the next couple of weeks now, Alex?
I'm riding Jordan Binnington. I even presented a couple of weeks ago, Binnington's struggling a little bit. Maybe you give Hofer a little bit of a run. But this is prime Jordan Binnington real estate, where you're in do-or-die situations. You need to win games. You have a very attainable opportunity to get 3 in a row, or maybe 4 or 5 in a row with what the schedule holds. You've got yesterday and today off. You take on Minnesota, and then you come home for 4 straight. And there's a day off in between every one of these games, and then also a 2 days off in between Columbus and Calgary. But you've got Minnesota tomorrow, which is going to be a tough matchup, but with Binnington and net, I'd give them an opportunity. Anaheim, Columbus, Calgary. That's the next 5 games. I think you'll probably see Hofer get one of those starts. My guess is probably one of those against the Calgary Flames, which then tells me it's Binnington against Minnesota, Anaheim, Columbus, and one of those against the Calgary Flames. And honestly, BK, that's what this should be. We always talk about how you ride your best player, and if it fails, well, then you fall. But there's no excuses for it. Binnington's going to get an extended run here, and if you look at what he's done in the last 4 starts, that Buffalo Sabres game was a tough one. Shutout against Detroit, incredible against the Blackhawks in the Winter Classic, shutout against the Ottawa Senators. I'm giving him an extended run because that's my number 1 dude, and right now you are playing do-or-die hockey for the Blues' playoff hopes.
Man, that's really interesting. I think I would probably go Benner. I'm definitely going Benner tonight. That's the starting point. And I'm going Benner against Columbus because I can't go back to Hofer against Columbus after what happened this past weekend. It really comes down to what do you do in that game against Anaheim? Like, are you going with Benner in 3 straight, or are you willing to give him a night off? And as much as I think that Benner gives you the better chance to win right now, I would probably give him the night off against Anaheim to keep him fresh because I don't want to overexert him. And I'll probably give him one of the games off against Calgary. So to me, it's a Benner, Hofer, Benner, Hofer, Benner. Over the next 5, Benner gets 3, Hofer gets 2. Really what we're talking about here is just one game that we have different, and that would be against Anaheim. But yeah. I just want to make sure that Binnington does not get into the situation that we have seen so many times in the past where he ends up getting overused, and then you deal with some of the consequences of that down the stretch as well. So I think that's kind of what they're guarding against right now is, do you go with the dude? Do you just push with a guy that is your true number 1, or do you continue to maintain him in a way to make sure that you don't overexert him?
You know, so, and I like that, BK, and we kind of talked about what I would do. I think to flip that a little bit, what will the Blues do? I think you're going to see the 2-1 remain strong. I think you'll get Minnesota and Anaheim as Binnington. I do think they give Joel Hofer that game against Columbus once again. 1, you were on the road and Joel Hofer has not been good this season. 2, you've already seen that team, so you know what to expect as a goaltender. And then if that's the case, the 2 must-wins for the Blues in this next 5-game stretch, BK, and a lot of these are already must-wins, but it's those 2 games against the Calgary Flames. And so if you stick with the 2-1, Minnesota and Anaheim is Binnington. Hofer gets Columbus, where Hofer's got like a .920 save percentage on home versus the road. Hofer just has not been good on the road this season. Benner's been good on the road, which then you go 2 versus Calgary, both Jordan Binnington, and then you put Joel Hofer on the road against Utah. So it's going to be interesting. David Alexander has the schedule already prepped. These guys already know what they're doing and what games they're playing. But it would not surprise me if Binnington gets like a 3-to-1 ratio over this next 5-game stretch because you need wins. And now I think the goalie coach, the head coach, realizes that Binnington's locked in.
We've spent a lot of time talking about the goal suppression. It is worth noting, despite the loss over the weekend, the Blues have found their secondary scoring. Credit to Brandon Saad for his hat trick on Friday. You ended up getting a couple of goals over the weekend as well from Braden Shin. So that secondary scoring that we spent the majority of the show talking about on Friday, it's finally showing up in a meaningful way. They have now scored 4-7-2. 6, 4, and 4 goals over the past 3 weeks of games. That is a 6-game sample size, and they've scored 4 or more in 5 of them. That's the kind of thing that this team's going to need. You got to start having those big time, like, all right, the offense is getting going types of performances, and it seems like things are trending in that direction. So fingers crossed that can continue tomorrow night against Minnesota. Alex will have your pregame coverage for that one tomorrow night right here in your home of the Blues 101 ESPN. Fingers crossed we'll be able to get in the studio for that one tomorrow. With Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. Alex and I are broadcasting from home today as the weather is a little frightful outside. T-Bone was able to make his trek into the studio, so he's holding things down for us back in Creve Coeur. Coming up in about 15 minutes or so, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get any of your questions in as we get into questions and answers. But coming up next, Coaching Carousel off and running, and the New York Jets have an unbelievable list of candidates that they're going to be interviewing. We'll get into that and the one surprise for me that we have seen thus far. We'll talk about it next year on 101 ESPN.
Alex Ferrario with you to talk about my friends over at Classic Air Care. When it comes to taking care of your HVAC system, they are the company that you need to call, especially at times like these when it's freezing outside. You hope that your heater can get through. If you're a part of their maintenance agreement, then that means you've already had the check. It's been fine-tuned, and it's ready to get you through these seasons. I've been using Classic Air Care since 2016. Why? Because of that maintenance agreement and because you have such knowledgeable technicians when they come out. I've had a couple of instances where I've needed them to come out, check something for me. They're out very timely. You get credible scheduling times, but when those technicians come out, they give me an answer right away, and they explain to me what happened and how to avoid it for times to come. So give them a call today. Tell them Alex Ferrario sent you. Check out that maintenance agreement. Again, you will not be disappointed when it comes to issues that pop up when you get priority scheduling thanks to the maintenance agreement with Classic Air Care. And if you're in the market for an HVAC system, they've got financing available for you. Tell them Alex Ferrario sent you. Classic Air Care and ClassicAirCare.com.
Blues and Wild. Pre-game at 6. Puck drop at 7. The wait is over. The quest for the Stanley Cup happens here on your home of the Blues. 101 ESPN. 101 ESPN. Sports Center.
Tanner Hendrickson here with a Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Blues fell to the Columbus Blue Jackets over the weekend, 6-4. They'll be back in action tomorrow night as they visit the Minnesota Wild. We'll have pregame coverage starting at 6 o'clock with Alex Ferrario, then puck drop at 7 o'clock with the voice of the Blues, Chris Kerber. And tonight here on 101 ESPN, we've got college football's FCS championship game as North Dakota State takes on Montana State. We'll have pregame coverage starting at 5:30. This Sports Center update is driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at Londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
They are St. Louis. It's BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN.
All right, it's Black Monday in the NFL, which means we're seeing some firings taking place. We started out with the Patriots last night firing Gerard Mayo. He lasted all of one season, Alex, as the head coach of the New England Patriots, coming off of the disastrous season that they had. It just very clearly was not working for him.
Can't lose that first round draft or that first overall pick, T-Bone.
Yeah, not great in that regard, but he is out as the Patriots head coach. The Jaguars have decided, as expected, to fire Doug Peterson as well. There are some questions up in the air. We don't know what's going to take place with the Cowboys yet. We're not sure yet. I haven't seen any reports on the Raiders either. I don't know if you guys have seen anything there, but I haven't seen anything one way or the other on what their plans are with Antonio Pierce. It seems like they might be trending towards keeping him, which is crazy to me, but whatever. The Giants have also decided that they are going to bring everybody back, as have the Colts, it sounds like. So when you've got a good thing going, I guess you just keep it going, I suppose.
Even after Joe Flacco made some really bold comments about being stuck in the middle with that Colts team.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like things are in a great spot there. So that's kind of where things stand. Now, the Seahawks have also fired their offensive coordinator, Ryan Grubb, who previously was with Washington. He was in his first season as the offensive coordinator there. They have fired him after just one season at the helm. Mike McDonald went on radio in Seattle earlier today and said, I didn't have the same vision as he did. I'm curious, Alex, just kind of big picture wise, has anything surprised you yet with what we have seen from the coaching carousel and what they have available right now?
I mean, to be honest with you, the Colts is very surprising to me. Like I just mentioned, like Joe Flacco after the game talking about, how he's got references of being stuck in the middle and how it's not an easy place to be. And like you make those comments, you're not even the number one guy, Anthony Richardson, who is already shown you with his actions that he's kind of in and out when it comes to that team. And I know that Shane Steichen is a really good head coach, but, man, they have a lot of issues right now in terms of what Indianapolis is trying to accomplish for a team that thought they could be a competitor. So that one's surprising to me. Antonio Pierce is a little wild, but I wonder if they're trying to figure out who they're taking and if Shedeur Sanders is going to be there. And then once that takes place, then they get their head coach. I'll tell you the one that's most intriguing to me, BK, and it's not surprising that they're doing this, but it's the Patriots job.
Yep.
Like, everything about that Patriots job screams, if I'm a head coach, I want to go there. I know I got a really good quarterback in Drake May. I've got, the second overall pick because they missed out on that first overall. I've got cap space, and I've got an opportunity to bring in playmakers. So I love the position that the Patriots are in, and I think they're probably going to be the most desirable job.
So, T-Bone, that's the one that surprised me a little bit. I thought maybe they would just keep Gerard Mayo in place for another year and try to improve his staff around him. They decided not to do that. They decided to go with the clean sweep of, hey, let's start anew here, start fresh, let's get somebody else in here. And I think the reason why is what Alex just mentioned. I think it's a good job right now. Now, you have to go up against the Bills, and that's tough. Like, that doesn't make things easy to win your division. But as we saw this year with Jim Harbaugh in the AFC West, just because you have one juggernaut in your division doesn't mean you can't have a successful season. We saw the Chargers and the Broncos. Once you got your coach and quarterback in place, everything else seems to kind of flow from there. I think the Patriots is a really good job. In fact, so good that I know everybody is connecting them to Mike Vrabel, understandably so. He's a good head coach. I think he'd do a good job there. He's got all the history with the organization. Like, it makes sense, and that's probably the direction that I would bet on them going. But if you're them, why don't you write a blank check for Ben Johnson?
Agreed.
You've got the quarterback. He is clearly the best offensive mind available. I don't know if it'll work as a head coach, because sometimes we see like the offensive guru that ends up becoming the head coach. It just doesn't work for whatever reason. But it might. It has for other guys, like it did for Kyle Shanahan. It did for Sean McVay. It has for Kevin O'Connell. We've seen it work in other spots. So if I'm the Patriots, I think that's my first call, despite the organizational understanding and trust in what Mike Vrabel can bring to the table. I'm trying to maximize what I've got and what I think might be the best rookie quarterback going right now in Drake May.
Yeah, I actually don't mind the idea of calling Vrabel first because of what you said there. Sure, Ben Johnson, we've seen it work in Detroit. I've also seen coordinators that have worked in their spot leave and it not be successful. And I'm not sure that that will be the case for Ben Johnson, but when you've got a known commodity in Mike Vrabel that the organization is very familiar with, I know that when he gets brought in, he's going to maximize our roster, and it's a spots where you've got the rookie quarterback, you've got a ton of cap space, the 4th overall pick. Like, it's the perfect storm for Mike Vrabel to come in, implement what he wants to do, rather than bring in a potential, maybe wild card's too strong of wording, but a wild card in Ben Johnson, a guy that's never been a head coach, has never had success as a head coach because we've never been able to see it yet. I like the idea when you're the best available job in the New England Patriots, bringing in a guy that you know very well and a guy that you know can have success as a head coach because he's done it before with the Tennessee Titans.
I'm on the other side of that. I'm with BK. I would call Ben Johnson first because of the offensive mindset. And T-Bone's right. Like, we've seen offensive coordinators fail when they get an opportunity. But, man, I've also seen it work. And if I got the bright offensive mindset of Ben Johnson with Drake May, cap space to potentially be aggressive and go sign a T. Higgins if he becomes available, and draft Travis Hunter, you already know the Patriots defense just is a continuing cycle of really good success, and you expect Ben Johnson to bring in the right defensive coordinator. But, man, if I got that offensive mindset, BK, with a quarterback that I believe is going to be great, and if I could get 2 established wide receivers, man, that's an opportunity to go from really bad to really good in 1 year.
Yeah, that's where I'm at as well, but I do understand T-Bone's perspective. It's the classic floor versus ceiling case, T-Bone. Like, Mike Vrabel, I think the floor is really high with him. I just think Mike Vrabel's a really good head coach, and I think you would get good results with it. So I would not have any hire. I would have zero criticisms of the hire. I think it'd be a good move. I just think the ceiling, if you get somebody like a Ben Johnson, is like you might have the next Kevin O'Connell.
Yeah,
and
that's what I was thinking of.
Then you have the play caller tied to the quarterback, and you potentially got it for the next 10 to 15 years. It rarely works out that way, but if it does, then you've got a situation that everybody in the NFL is envious of. So let's assume they end up with Vrabel. So Ben Johnson still remains available for everybody else. You got the Jets, the Saints. The Jets, though, are not an option for Ben Johnson, apparently. He has, quote, no interest, end quote, in interviewing for that job. No surprise.
Why would that be?
Yeah. So the Saints are available, the Bears are available, the Jaguars are available. Those are the other 3 that are open as of today. If you're in Ben Johnson's shoes, which of those situations is most appealing to you? Saints, Bears, or Jags? Or are you holding out hope that one of the Cowboys or Raiders opens up?
Man, I think in terms of roster-wise, I would say the Jacksonville Jaguars, because I've got a quarterback, whether you like Trevor Lawrence or not. I've got the 4th overall draft pick, and I've got an owner who's willing to spend.
In a division that stinks.
Yep. But I got a GM that not a lot of people like, so I think I might. Although the Chicago Bears have a GM that not a lot of people like, and who knows if he's going to be there. I don't want the Saints job because that is just cap hell right now. I don't know if I want to go to the Cowboys. Is it odd if I'm Ben Johnson to be like, maybe I stick around in Detroit 1 more year?
So that's what I was wondering. Like, eventually he needs to go. Eventually he needs to go and get his opportunity elsewhere, but man, like, I'm not taking that Saints job. No interest. No, sir. The Raiders? Nah. No quarterback. Really tough division. Arguably the best division in the NFL right now. No interest in that one whatsoever. It'd be cool to live in Vegas, but that's pretty much all I got. That's a plus in their direction. And you'd also get paid. Like, they're willing to pay their coaches, as we've seen in the past. Cowboys, I just don't know that I want to deal with the Jerry Jones mess of it all. Like, it's just a lot because every game you've got him talking about your team. You can't control the messaging. Like, it's a tough spot. If the Jags are willing to fire their GM, and as of today, they're not. But I saw this with the Chiefs when they hired Andy Reid. They ended up firing Scott Pioli because Andy Reid wanted to bring his own GM in. That was not the plan. The plan was to keep Pioli and then hire the coach. Andy convinced them to do it the other direction. Maybe Ben Johnson can do that for the Jacksonville Jaguars. If that happens, I'm picking the Jags. If it doesn't, I think you've got to look at the Bears and say, all right, do I trust Caleb Williams? Can I win with Caleb Williams? And then the answer to that question dictates whether or not you take the job. If you believe you can get the most out of Caleb Williams and you can win with him, you got to take it. If you don't, I think you stay in Detroit for another year. It sounds crazy because he's the top candidate on the market once again, but I think you wait, hold out hope, see if one of the jobs that's in the playoffs right now potentially opens up. Like, we'll see what happens with Philadelphia, for example. I don't think they're going to make a change, but who knows? That would be my plan of attack, is see if the Jags will fire their GM, decide whether or not you can win with Caleb Williams, and then if not, I'm staying in Detroit.
Yeah, for me, I wouldn't even take the Jaguars job, even if they fired GM, because I think that roster is in shambles. I don't think they've got the quarterback in-house. I know they've got Trevor Lawrence on the roster. I don't think he's the guy. I don't think you can win with Trevor Lawrence. I would look at the Bears job, and then I would answer that question that you asked. Can I win with Caleb Williams? Because I think his ceiling is higher than Lawrence. granted, I didn't see a lot from Caleb Williams this year. He holds the ball too much in the pocket, and that can be problematic whether or not he develops or not. When it tries to move the ball down the field offensively, if my answer is no, I can't win with Caleb Williams, I'm going back to Detroit, unless Philadelphia opens up. But I think they're going to win their first-round game, and I think that's all it takes for them to keep Sirianni around. I think it's down to the Chicago Bears or the Detroit Lions to return as the offensive coordinator for Ben Johnson.
I think so, too. And then it just comes down to, like, again, the Jaguars making a terrible decision organizationally, because I think the Jags had every opportunity to get Ben Johnson. All the rumors and reports out there seem to indicate like he's interested in the job. They're willing to pay what he's going to be asking for, which is a boatload of money. And then they decided to keep their general manager, who everybody in the NFL seems to agree is not good at his job. So there's that. One last thing to add here. Here are the candidates that the Jets have requested a head coaching interview with. Aaron Glenn, okay. Bobby Slowick, the offensive coordinator for the Texans, who has as much of a case to be fired as he does to be an NFL head coach next year. Joe Brady, okay. Mike Vrabel, all right, sure. Vance Joseph, Matt Nagy, Arthur Smith, Ron Rivera, Rex Ryan, and a late addition to the list, Brian Griese, the former ESPN NFL commentator who is now doing work with the San Francisco 49ers. What a list.
Cool. So the New York Jets going to be bad again next year.
Unbelievable, dude. Absolutely incredible. So not a great spot for them, and they still don't know what they're doing with the quarterback situation next year either. All right, coming up next, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. Want to ask you guys how much you think teams should be willing to spend on a coach if they were to get them in a trade. We'll get that answered coming up here in just a little bit, and we'll get to all of your questions as well here on BK and Ferrario.
For your chance to win a signed puck autographed by Blues defenseman Justin Falk.
Falk shoots it. He scores!
Get entered to win that Justin Falk signed puck right now, either at 101ESPN.com or on your 101 mobile app, powered by the Schaefer Door Company.
Giving you the picture, the real big St. Louis sports picture. It's BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. You've got questions, we may have the answers. Maybe. It's BK and Ferrario's questions and answers on 101 ESPN.
All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. It's time for questions and answers here on BK and Ferrario. I want to start out with one that I've got for you guys, and then we'll get to the questions from the listeners as well. So there were a couple of reports yesterday. One from Jay Glazer of Fox Sports, who said, hey, there's a mystery candidate out there, and his name is Kevin O'Connell. And teams are interested in potentially trading for him if he were to become available this offseason because his contract is up with the Minnesota Vikings. Now, he added he doesn't expect that to happen, but it's possible, so it's something worth monitoring. The other came from Adam Schefter, who said, hey, there's another mystery candidate out there. I love these mystery candidates. And it's Mike Tomlin. I feel like we do this every offseason, but he said, hey, if there is a team out there that's willing to trade for Tomlin, maybe it's something that the Steelers would consider. He also said, seems doubtful, but possible nonetheless. Those guys are both legit top 10 coaches in the NFL right now. So my question to you, if a legitimate top 10 coach became available, Vrabel and Kevin O'Connell could be placeholders for that in this specific conversation, what would you be willing to offer? If you were another team, let's say you're the Patriots, you're the Jaguars, you're the Bears, whoever, what are you willing to offer for a coach like that, given what's available right now in the market?
I mean, if I'm one of those teams that desperately needs a head coach, it's hard to say a first-round pick because we're talking like top 10, top 15, and that's a massive bounty to play for a head coach. But like a second-round pick, 2 second-round picks, a second and a third, the equivalent as close to a first-round pick as possible without giving up a first-round pick. That's what I'd be willing to pay if you're telling me Kevin O'Connell's available or Mike Tomlin's available. Yeah, if I'm the Chicago Bears, just as long as it's not a first-round pick, I'll give it up.
If I'm the Jets, I'm giving up my number 7 overall pick for Mike Tomlin. That would be the guy that I'd be looking for, because I just need somebody to take all the BS out of our system. Like, just please make this thing work. And now think about all of the different guys that he's made it work with over the years in Pittsburgh. Like Antonio Brown, he figured out a way to make it work. Right now with George Pickens, like, it hasn't shown up necessarily on the field as much as you would expect it to as being a problem. So if I could get him in New York, that would be the team that I'd be willing to give up my first-round pick for him. I think the Bears, Kevin O'Connell would be the one that I'd be willing to give it up for. But they're not going to trade him in the division, so it's a moot point. I don't think either of these guys are being moved, but I do think it's an interesting conversation of, like, what are you willing to spend? How valuable is that coach in draft pick compensation? I think the answer for some of these guys, like, you look at the playoffs right now, dude. All of these teams that remain playing have legit top 10-ish coaches in the NFL. I'd say the worst coach remaining is like DeMeco Ryans, maybe, in Houston. Dan Quinn went to a Super Bowl with Atlanta. Todd Bowles has won a Super Bowl. Like Sean Payton's Super Bowl winner. I think the worst coach remaining. Oh, I guess Sirianni, you could make the argument as well. But again, went to a Super Bowl. So the one guy that you really don't trust yet, and it's just because he's young in his career, is probably DeMeco Ryans. You've got to get that. You've got to get that spot solidified, and these guys do that for you.
Yeah, I would be willing to give up a first-round pick. Now, I think some of that needs to be with some clarifiers to that, like that 7th overall pick, the Jets to get Tomlin, to me would be ridiculous, because that's not there's not players that are an issue outside of Rodgers, but there's not a major player issue. That's an ownership issue, right? And if I am the GM of the Jets, which I guess they don't have one, but I wouldn't be giving up a number 7 overall pick to help my roster. Well, we've got bigger issues at hand, which is ownership. And that's why it would be ridiculous for them to make that move, because they are dysfunctional, because it starts at the top of that organization. Not because it's with the players, though they can't have some of that problem with them, but it's with their owner. So I wouldn't be willing to move on a 7th overall pick, but I do think if you wanted to acquire a Mike Tomlin or a Kevin O'Connell, it would cost a first-round pick and maybe even slightly more. I mean, Sean Payton got a first and a second pick from the Broncos to the Saints to get him. So, like, that's where the market lies to get those kind of guys.
I apologize. You can hear Luca crying in the background. It is what it is, guys. We're broadcasting from home today. You are getting the full at-home experience as we do this. All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers. From the 636, Alex will do these quick hitter style. Who gets traded, in your opinion, to make room for Dvorsky and Snuggerud, or do the Blues need to make any trades, in your opinion, for that to happen?
I think one of them probably either needs to get traded or one gets sent down. My guess is it's Brandon Saad. By the time, and they're not going to bring Dvorsky up until post-trade deadline. We've talked a lot about that. And Snuggerud's not coming until the final 3 games of the season. So that's why I'm not trading somebody to make a spot for Snuggerud. Snuggerud will be there, and then you'll just have an extra player on the roster. When Dvorsky's ready, that's where I think Brandon Saad gets traded away.
That feels right to me. He feels like the one that would be most likely to end up going. From the 801, Alex, do you think that the Blues will end up re-signing Joel Hofer?
Yes. Who cares how bad he's been the last couple of games, or if he's been bad the last couple of games? You're not giving up on a backup goaltender who will be your number 1 goaltender in the future. When he's you're going to give him a bridge contract, which will take you to the end of Jordan Binnington's. He'll stay as kind of the 1A, 1B, and then when Binnington's contract is up, depending on what that looks like and what Joel Hofer looks like, then you make a decision moving forward. But yeah, he'll be re-signed.
Yeah, that would be my guess as well, as a bridge deal. T-Bone?
I agree. I think it would be a bridge deal for Joel Hofer. He plays like a backup, right? There's games where he looks great, and at times we have that conversation of, boy, could he take Binnington's job? And then you see a game like Columbus, you go, oh, yeah, okay, yeah. He's still a young goalie and clearly still a backup.
Yeah, a really nice 1B is the way that I would.
It's his second full season in the NHL, so like there's still a lot of growing pains that comes with a goaltender.
And he's not even as good as my boy Husso yet, so that's all I'm
he's
gonna
much
say.
better than Husso already. Husso's been in the minor leagues already this season.
Dominating,
with Alex
probably.
Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. You've got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. In 15 minutes, we'll dive into some more NFL quick hitters, including Tyreek Hill trying to cry his way out of Miami. Who could have seen this one potentially coming? We'll get into that in 15 minutes or so. But coming up next, it sure sounds like there is a leading contender for Nolan Arenado's services. It's a team that we've talked about in the past, but not the one that I would have pinpointed as the number 1 option. We'll tell you who that is next here on 101 ESPN.
ESPN is driven by Brown and Crouppen Law Firm. We're right back to more of it. It's BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN.
All right, as the world turns with Nolan Arenado, that's what this offseason has become for the St. Louis Cardinals. With Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. Alex and I are broadcasting from home today. T-Bone was brave enough to go out there and drive. He did not do so today, just full disclosure. T-Bone drove over to a hotel last night. He stayed over there, was ready to go for a show today, so he was not in harm's way, just to make sure that everybody's aware of that. But he is in the studio for us, holding things down to make sure that we could come on the air for you guys today. Nolan Arenado, there is another update, and this one comes from not the Cardinals' perspective, but from Nolan Arenado and the Boston Red Sox perspective. A beat writer out in Boston yesterday reported that the Red Sox are expected to be Arenado's preferred destination. He likes the roster, he likes their manager, he likes the idea of playing for a team with a lot of history. That was one of the things that drove him to the St. Louis Cardinals when he was originally traded here. And it sounds like his preferred destination is Boston. Let's start out with this. When you guys saw this news last night, what was your reaction, Alex?
That it makes sense. I mean, we talked about this a long time ago, that Boston was trying to move Rafael Devers away from third base, that they needed to go find a third baseman that could be there. The connection's always been there with Boston, and if that's the desirable destination, then that's great for the Cardinals. So it doesnn't surprise me, but there still feels like a lot of hoops that you need to jump through with this one. One, what does Boston do with their first baseman, Tristan Casas? Is that his name?
Casas, yeah.
Casas, yeah. So you got that. Then you also have to play the waiting game once again, which the last time the Cardinals did that with the Houston Astros, they pivoted pretty quick. But the Boston Red Sox, of course, have been tied to Alex Bregman, so now you're waiting to find out, is it Bregman or is it Arenado? And to sweeten the pot, if they're going to go Arenado over Bregman, you're probably going to have to make that deal cheaper, and then you got to come to an agreement of what you're getting back in return, and I would imagine Boston's going to be a little hesitant because of Chaim Bloom. So it still feels like there's a lot of hula hoops to jump through if you're the Cardinals, but this doesn't surprise me. It's always kind of felt like Boston's been in the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I don't get what the Red Sox are doing, but that's not Mo's problem, right? Mo's problem is Arenado's money being on the books. So if you're in Mozeliak's shoes, and if Arenado has come to the front office and said, hey, look, here's the 6 teams I want to go to, but really I want to be a Boston Red Sox, right? I want to go just drill that big monster out there in left field. Well, then you call the Boston Red Sox. Red Sox are probably going to tell Mo, hey, look, we're still trying to sort out if we're in on this Bregman market or not. And then you go from there. But you get in the ear of Boston Red Sox management, right? Chaim Bloom, maybe call some of those guys that he worked with, and you say, hey, look, we're open to moving Arenado. If you guys don't get Bregman, don't just pivot somewhere else. Call us first. Call us. Let's talk about Nolan Arenado. What would it take to get him there? How much money do we have to eat? And then we can have a serious conversation, because if they truly want to move Devers from third to first, there's only 2 significant upgrades at third base that they can do that would improve them from what they could have internally, and that is Alex Bregman, and it is Nolan Arenado. There are no 2 other options, so you at least are in the range of outcomes there in Boston to say, hey, we can be your pivot for you if you lose out on Bregman's market.
So that's the thing to me. Like you said, you don't understand it from Boston's perspective. Now, I don't understand why they're so hell-bent on moving Devers to first, but whatever. That's, again, not our problem. Once you make that move, if you're out on Casas and you want to move Devers over to first, well, there are literally 2 options that you can convince yourself, okay, these guys make us better as a baseball team by having them at third. And it's Alex Bregman and Nolan Arenado. And I do not think that at this point in their respective careers, Nolan Arenado is a better baseball player than Alex Bregman. I want to say that on the front end. However, if you're presenting the contracts to me that both of them could end up getting, which is like $200 million for Alex Bregman, or let's call it a 3-year, $75 million contract once the Cardinals pay stuff down for Nolan Arenado. 3-year 50, 3-year 75, somewhere in that range. I'd rather have the Arenado deal if I'm the Boston Red Sox. I just think there's less risk involved with it. He's going to play really good defense for us. He's going to be, I'd say, slightly above league average at that specific ballpark. I think he could do really well, given what they have in left field with the Green Monster. works well for his hitting style. I don't think he'll hit many home runs, but the doubles could really start to increase for him despite his lack of speed. So I think it could be a pretty good fit for him there. And he also has another star that he could be the Robin to, as opposed to needing to be the number one player within the lineup. So I could see it actually fitting pretty well for them. And if I'm Mo, this is best case scenario because I've got my right-hand man right now who's taking over next year, was just there. He was in charge of their entire system. He built it back up. So nobody should have a better understanding of some of the more undervalued prospects within the Red Sox system than Chaim Bloom. So I actually think this is the best case scenario for the Cardinals, is if this is truly his preferred destination and the Red Sox are interested. That being said, it feels like there's some conflicting reports out there right now on the level of interest from Boston. And that's where this could once again get dicey is, okay, so Arenado would like to go to Boston or LA. Like those appear to be the two spots that he's most interested in right now. What if they're not interested in you, Nolan? Like then what? Do you want to come back to St. Louis? Are you willing to do whatever it takes to get out? That's where I don't seem to have a great read on this right now, T-Bone, is what happens if Boston says no? Because it appears that the Dodgers have already said no.
Yeah, I think if the Red Sox say no, I think you're stuck with Nolan Arenado. I don't know where the other pivot is because every team that we've had a conversation about, to me, hasn't made much sense. Like Boston. To me, I would just run it back with Devers and Casas at first base if you don't land Bregman. Bregman, to me, I'd rather sign than have Nolan Arenado. I look at the LA Angels. I don't get what they're doing because Anthony Rendon's, they still have his money's tied up on the book, and I don't think they're going to go up to that luxury tax. If they're still interested in Pete Alonso on top of Nolan Arenado, all of a sudden they're starting to run out of money, especially if they bring in Alonso. So I think they're stuck. That's why I never understood Nolan Arenado, if his saying, because a lot of the reporting when he declined that trade to the Houston Astros was, well, I want to wait and see how the market develops. No, you don't get a choice on how the market develops because if you say no to the Astros, they are going to pivot. They will move away from you, and then you are stuck in St. Louis. Now, maybe that is a sign of him saying, that's fine with me if I end up back in St. Louis. I'm okay with being back on this retooling team. But I think he thought there was going to be a bigger market for himself, and I just don't think there is. I think baseball's looking at him going, he's barely above league average offensively. Why are we going to take on $60 million of that guy over 3 years when we can just stick with what's in-house internally or go and explore the Bregman market? I think it's definitely in play that if Boston says we're not interested in Nolan Arenado will be the Cardinals' starting third baseman come opening day.
Man, that is such a tough pill to swallow if you're the Cardinals.
But you know what, BK? This is going to sound weird, especially coming from me, but if you're Nolan Arenado and you want to do everything possible to get out of St. Louis, nobody wants you. Like, you want to talk about the biggest realization that no team wants you in Major League Baseball, then you better come back and you better work your ass off to be a better player so that you can get out of St. Louis. And that might benefit the Cardinals if he at least comes back and performs somewhat better than what he was last year to find a way to get traded maybe at the deadline to a team if your options open up a little bit more. There's 1 year less, maybe a little less money. Like, it could benefit the Cardinals. Do I believe it's going to happen? No, because I think Nolan Arenado is who he is. But we talk about this all the time in hockey or in other sports. You want the best realization and come to Jesus moment of like, hey, nobody wants me around this league. That should motivate you more to perform than what you did these last couple of years.
I would have that same opinion if, I don't want to put a name on it, but if this was another player that I thought his problem was he wasn't like buying into the specific type of player that he needed to be, or that he wasn't working as hard as he needed to. That's not my feel on Arenado. Like, I think with Nolan, the skills have just diminished, man. Like, he's not the same player that he once was, and there's nothing he can do necessarily to get that back. I think he is just slower and older, doesn't have the same pop that he once did. And this is kind of who he's going to be. Like, he's going to be a roughly league average hitter with plus defense at third base. And the tough part is, how do you value that? If you're the Cardinals or another team, and I think they're showing you right now, like, we value what that player can be. He can be a nice piece on a championship contending roster. The Astros clearly believed that, and they're a contending team. But the money is where it gets complicated. And the Nolan Arenado contract is one of those deals that we've talked about in the past where, like, you want the front end to make good for what the back end is going to be. These deals never age particularly gracefully, and Arenado's deal is not aging gracefully. He is at the back end of a contract that you wanted to get the value for the front end, and you kind of did. You just didn't get the playoff results, unfortunately. You got the MVP caliber season. You didn't take advantage of it once you got to the postseason that year between him and Paul Goldschmidt. Now you're dealing with the back end, and another team trading for that sees it for what it is. And I don't think that's going to change. I don't think next year or at the deadline, suddenly teams are going to be lining up because Arenado is 5% above league average offensively again. I think this is just the type of player that he's going to be long term. So I'm with you, Alex. Like, if you're him, maybe this adds a little extra motivation to his offseason to be like, I'm going to prove everybody wrong, and good for him for that. I just don't know how much that matters, because I don't think Nolan Arenado's problem is a lack of work ethic. I think sometimes he works himself to a nub and it becomes a problem for him that he's working so incredibly hard to get things back on track. So I don't know, man. This is worst case scenario for the Cardinals. I saw somebody tweet this a couple of weeks ago, I think it was, like, for all the talk about the youth movement, Cardinals haven't exactly done a lot to have a youth movement. They haven't moved anybody out other than free agents that were already going to be off the books this offseason anyways. Like, Miles Michaelis, still here. Steven Matz, still here. Nolan Arenado, still here. Ryan Helsley, still here. Every player that could have been back on the team that was an older veteran, still on the roster right now. So for all the bluster about, oh, we're going in a new direction, it's going to be a changing of the guard, it has been anything but so far this offseason. Coming up in 15 minutes, we're going to talk about the Blues. Alex, did you know they are the #1 team in the NHL at goal suppression since Monty took over as the head coach? We'll talk about how they've done that in about 15 minutes. But coming up next, it's time for some NFL quick hitters, including Tyreek Hill trying to talk his way out of Miami. Is it going to work for him? We'll talk about that next year on 101 ESPN. Hey, it's BK for my friends over at Victory Men's Health. It is that time of the year where people are putting together what their New Year's resolutions are. I know Alex doesn't do them. Many of you do, and the best place to be able to get the best version of yourself is Victory Men's Health. It is time to unlock your inner champion, and that means different things for different people. Maybe around this time of the year, a lot of people, their goal is lose a little bit of that unwanted weight. They could potentially help you out over at Victory Men's Health. Low testosterone issues. If you don't feel like you have the amount of energy as you're walking around, you're not getting the same effects from your workouts, low testosterone could be a cause for that. Erectile dysfunction is also something that they can help you out with over at Victory Men's Health. The process to book your first appointment is incredibly easy. Check them out at victorymenshealth.com. That's victorymenshealth.com. Upper right tab of that website, there's a book now tab. You put in your name, email, phone number, tell them a little bit about how you heard about them through BK with 101 ESPN, and then tell them how they can unlock your inner champion. It's Victory Men's Health and victorymenshealth.com. That's victorymenshealth.com.
ESPN.com or on your 101 mobile app. Powered by Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers.
This is exactly where you want to be listening to us. It's BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN.
This is my first time I haven't been in the playoffs, man. So, I mean, for me, like I said, man, I just got to do what's best for me and my family, dog. If that's here, or if that's wherever the case may be, man, I'm finna open that door for myself, dog. As I'm opening the door, like, I'm out, bro. You know, so it was great playing here, but...
That was Tyreek Hill yesterday after the game when asked what the plan is for him going into this offseason, how the team gets better. With Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. Who could have seen this one coming? Tyreek Hill, not exactly the best player to have on your team when things aren't going in your direction. He has since posted a picture on Twitter. His new profile picture on Twitter is Antonio Brown's body after he was leaving the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, running off of the field with no shirt on. He took all of his clothes off. He disrobed on the field, and then with Tyreek Hill's face doing the peace sign. So Tyreek Hill clearly wants out of Miami. He's done. And Adam Schefter earlier today came out and said, hey, this has been a developing situation. It's kind of been something all year long that's been bubbling underneath the surface. I think we could all feel that as well as you watched the games or as you heard any of his comments. Here's the problem. Tyreek Hill has a $25 million dead cap hit if they trade him this year. Tyreek Hill has a $57 million dead cap hit if they were to cut him this offseason. So the Dolphins sure as hell ain't cutting him. And I don't know where they're trading him for another team that's going to want to take on like a $25 million cap hit for this version of Tyreek Hill. Older, not as productive this season. Alex, what do you see as the future for Tyreek Hill? Do you think this is going to work? He's going to be able to get his way out of Miami?
No, congratulations, Tyreek. You're stuck in Miami. Like, he should hold a press conference like LeBron James did and make the decision of, I've decided to keep my talents here in South Beach. Because you're not going anywhere, man. Like, one, you're older, like you just mentioned. Two, you got all of that money tied to you. And three, you think another team that's going to have the cap space, which typically are the rebuilding teams, the one that are bringing in rookie contracts and younger teams, you think they want your disaster? You just Photoshop your face on Antonio Brown's body. You think teams want that player in their organization? So, like, the worst PR Tyreek Hill could have ever done took place over the weekend, and now he's going to be like, well, I don't know. I don't want to be in Miami. What am I going to do? Well, you're stuck here, man, because you don't know how to handle PR like this. You decided to do this. You decided to sign your contract extension. You're stuck, man. You're stuck in Miami, which could be worse, but congrats on being in South Beach.
I think he gets his way. I think he gets out because I don't think Miami will look at that, and I don't think they'll keep him around. Now, I don't know how they do it because they're going to take on hella dead money when they make that move, but I think they move on from him, man. It is better not to have that guy in the locker room going into next season for a team that they'll have playoff aspirations, and I think they should. You know, you still have Tua. You've got a decent running back room. Smith at tight end can kind of take over as that second best option for you, and Jalen Waddle becomes your number one. And in Mike McDaniel's offense, we've seen they can have success when Tua is healthy. So I think they will look at it and say, you know what, it's better for us to just eat the dead cap hit, try and move on. I think somebody will convince themselves that Tyreek can still have a role in their offense. I don't think he'll be a Dolphin come the time we kick off next season.
Man, you guys know how I am with these things. I always would rather like call a player's bluff because, hey, you're under contract for 3 more years, dude. We literally 5 months ago, it's been 5 months since he signed a 3-year contract extension worth $90 million with the organization that he wanted to be with, clearly, at that point in time, 5 months ago for the long term. You forced your way here. And now you're telling me after we just signed you to a massive new contract before this season that you want out? Too bad, dude. Too bad. Figure it out. You're going to go out there next year with Tua Tagovailoa, who's hopefully going to be healthy and back in the saddle as the number 1 quarterback again. Go out there and play your best. And if you have another great season, cool. Then we can talk about whether or not you can get traded after next year. But for the time being, go be the best version of yourself. Go enjoy yourself this year playing with the Miami Dolphins, and then we'll figure this out after next season. That would be my route of handling this if I was the Dolphins. I do not think that will be their route because they were all in on this season, dude. They had to make it work this year, and their cap is a disaster moving forward. And this is a potential out clause for them to basically say, hey, what could we have possibly done? Tyreek said he wanted out. We had what T-Bone just said. We had to make this work inside of our locker room. So the best way for us to do it and for us to get some future, even if not 2025, some future cap relief is to trade him this offseason. Where do you guys think would be the best possible landing spot for Tyreek? Some of the offshore accounts early on have the Chargers as the favorite to land his services.
Yeah, I like the Chargers. I don't know if a Patriots team would want to take that on with Drake May, but
they're not trading him in the division. No chance.
That's a good point.
I thought about that was the first team that I thought about, though. It is a really intriguing spot. Washington's another one that I think would be fun.
Washington, and the Cowboys have no money, but the Cowboys make a lot of sense. I don't know how they would do it, but Cowboys would make a hell of a lot of sense. He and CeeDee Lamb is the 1-2 punch.
You know where I think could be interesting? Arizona. Putting him with
God, what
with
a disaster.
Kyler. For sure. In terms
my
of
first
personality,
reaction.
it's disastrous. But he makes a lot of sense with what they have offensively.
Man.
Like Marvin Harrison Jr. is kind of more of your physical possession style receiver. They've got a really good tight end. You have a running game there. He could live in Arizona's like an intriguing place to live, and that clearly matters to him. I could see
Grand
that.
Theft Auto 6 comes out this year. The amount of video games that'll be taking place between Tyreek Hill and Kyler Murray would be absurd.
Yeah, I don't know if I like the Arizona one. I mean, I get what you're saying schematically. I think that would be a disaster. The problem is, I don't know who he makes sense for. I don't know what Carolina's cap situation is. Could they convince themselves of, hey, now Bryce Young has figured it out. Now we need to go out and add a wide receiver. It's now time to build rather than be on the retreat. Maybe Carolina would explore that, but most of these teams that I'm looking at, I'm going, I wouldn't want him in the locker room, wouldn't want him in the locker room. I wouldn't want him with the Chargers. I wouldn't want him in the locker room, even though it makes a ton of sense from a winning perspective. I mean, this is one of those PR moves where it tells you, man, this doesn't feel like it is, hey, if we're got a winning culture, you don't bring that guy in.
I wonder if the Titans check in on that.
If you're him, though, you don't want to go there because I don't know what the quarterback situation is going to be.
Well, I guess that's true. Him saying that he wants to be on a playoff team. The problem is, man, you aren't that good, and there's not a lot of playoff teams that can bring you in.
I wonder if Baltimore could be a spot that says, you know what, if they lose this year, let's say they lose to the Bills, right, in the divisional round once again, I could see them convincing themselves, all right, add one more piece, one last piece to the offense, and this is going to be our all-in season with him, Derrick Henry, Mark Andrews, Zay Flowers. Let's go get this done.
Or what about Pittsburgh?
Sure, that makes a lot of sense.
Mike Tomlin stays. You get him in with Mike Tomlin.
Mike's got to deal with Pickens and Tyreek.
Oh, my God.
But the YOLO offense for Russell Wilson is going to thrive, right? Heave it up and hope one of the two come down with it.
That one makes a lot of sense. His last time around, he wanted to be in New York with the Jets. So if they end up with a quarterback this offseason, I don't know who that would be. But if they were to be able to find a franchise quarterback, maybe he could convince himself, hey, I'll go play for the Giants. I don't know, man. I don't know that there's a perfect landing spot for Tyreek Hill this time around.
I agree. Would Denver consider it? They would be interesting. Got the rookie contract. Sean Payton, bring him into the offense. Helped him with Cortland Sutton. I'm trying to see where they are in terms of money, but they're got to be getting close to having all of Russ.
They've got a rookie quarterback, so they should be in a pretty good spot post Russ situation.
I don't know if I want that problem that is Tyreek Hill now with a young Bo Nix.
They do have some pretty good vibes there. That's the thing with Washington too, where they make sense in so many different ways to potentially maximize what they have with Jaden Daniels while he's on this rookie deal, but got really good vibes there. Do you want to bring in Tyreek Hill, which could potentially ruin that? Tyreek, though, was a good soldier inside of the locker room for the first couple of seasons while they were winning in Miami. It went wrong when they won 8 games this year. All right, next thing up here as we go through some NFL quick hitters. This is probably going to be the last time we talk about the Bengals for a little bit. Last week, they were the #1 storyline in the NFL, and now it's just over. They fired their defensive coordinator today, Lou Anarumo, because he was the problem. Not the personnel. It was the defensive coordinator. That's the guy that we need to fire, even though I think he's going to be hired by somebody and immediately reemerge as one of the best DCs in the NFL. But anyways, when you look back at this season, what do you do if you're the Bengals? Like, how do you pivot from this? Do you bring back T. Higgins? Do you let him walk in free agency? Like, what do you do? Because I think there were some clear lessons here from this season of, hey, they've got an elite level offense. The problem is they don't have a defense. I think the question is like, okay, that's the lesson. How do we implement that into our future plans? And how does that pertain to T. Higgins' future here in Cincinnati? What do you guys see on that?
I don't think you can bring back T. Higgins because you need to fix this defense. And if you go give money to T. Higgins, you've got no money to put towards your defense. And you're right. Like, firing their defensive coordinator is just wild to me. I know you have to do something. That's the equivalent of the NHL firing a coach because your team's not performing well. But, like, you gave up, what was it that I saw? Like, 8 of their games this season, you gave up 30-plus points. Like, you got to go out and get some game breakers on the defensive side. And if you pay T. Higgins, as much as I think T. Higgins is an incredible wide receiver, man, you got to fix that defense somehow.
Yeah, I don't think you can run it back, even though that offense is great. Man, we've seen you got to have somewhat of a capable defense if you're going to win in the NFL. Otherwise, you're going to get where the Bengals are, which is fringe playoff team, and then you got to hope in the last week that things kind of go your way. I think you let T. Higgins walk, and then you use that allocated money, and you got to go and spend it on the defensive side of the ball, and then you got to lock up Jamar Chase. You can kind of piece this together as long as you have Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and then their running backs. They'll be fine with Zach Moss and Chase Brown there. Those are the two big pillars of Burrow and Chase. You don't need that third one in T. Higgins. You can go find his replacement in the NFL draft. They need to spend some money on the defensive side of the ball. Otherwise, they're going to go nowhere with Joe Burrow.
We're on the same page here, man. I think that's the right way to build it. I'm not sure that's the direction that this is going to go, though. I think they might, because Burrow has been publicly demanding that they bring back T. Higgins. He has been saying all season at seemingly every press availability possible, hey, this works because it's me, Jamar, and T. And T. Higgins is a type of player that you do not let get out of this locker room. That's the type of public comments that you don't hear very often from a quarterback. He re-signed with them. Jamar Chase is up for his contract. T. Higgins fired his old agent and got the agent that Jamar Chase has. So they now have the same agents that are going to be negotiating their respective contracts. I think if I was to predict what happens this offseason, I think they bring back both Chase and Higgins, and we end up seeing them have a cap on their ceiling because of that. They'll be a fun offense, and you'll see them, like, they'll become what the New Orleans Saints used to be when they had Drew Brees and that offense that was always scoring points, but they could never figure out the defensive side of the ball. It may come together eventually, but that'll be because of drafting and like really good drafts where they threw their assets at the defense that way. I just, who's the comparison for a team that has paid top dollar for their quarterback and 2 top dollar wide receivers? It doesn't really happen in the league anymore because of how much these quarterbacks are getting paid. So I think that's the way it goes. I just don't think it's necessarily the right way to go about it.
I was just going to say, if you're going to go on the front of the Cincinnati Bengals sticking with that, they're probably going to look at it and look at the Detroit Lions and say, well, hell, if we have an offense that puts up that many points, look how bad their defense is because of injuries and found a way to stay competitive. We'll just go that route.
I think they can stay competitive. Here's the problem. Are they going to be able to win a Super Bowl that way? Because ultimately, that's the goal. We'll find out with the Lions this year. They better get it done because this is the year. The Lions are basically in a 2-year window right now where they need to get one of the next 2 to be able to make this all worth it. They've been a fun team, and I don't think they have any regrets about how they've built. But at the end of the day, if they don't get any Super Bowls out of it, I think that would be a relatively disappointing thing. Kind of similar to the Cubs, right? Where like the Cubs had this whole plan. They built, and then they get to the World Series and win it once, and then it's just over. Just done. And you look back on it, you're like, I mean, they did break the dreaded curse, but other than that, like, I think it was pretty much a disappointing era for the Chicago Cubs when you look back on it. So it'll be interesting to see how we remember this era for the Detroit Lions as well. In 15 minutes, we're going to dive into the junk drawer with Alex and T-Bone. I'm BK. Coming up next, so the Blues are the best goal suppression team in the NHL under Jim Montgomery. How do they do it? What does it mean? We'll talk about it here on BK and Ferrario.
Tanner Hendricks near the Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Blues fell the Columbus Blue Jackets over the weekend. They'll be back in action tomorrow night as they hit the road to take on the Minnesota Wild. Well, pregame coverage starting at 6 o'clock with Alex Ferrario, then puck drop at 7 o'clock with the voice of the Blues, Chris Kerber. And tonight here on 101 ESPN, we've got college football FCS championship game between North Dakota State and Montana State. And we'll have pregame coverage starting at 5:30. This portion update was driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. SteveMilanoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
Shabbat has it. The crowd to their feet. 2 seconds to go and bring out the Zamboni. Brandon Saad with a hat trick fuels the St. Louis Blues 4-0 win. Jordan Bennington, another shutout. He's on fire. And the St. Louis Blues get the 4-0 victory over the Ottawa Senators, and they'll head to Columbus to keep the winning streak alive.
That's what it sounded like on Friday night right here in your home of the Blues, 101 ESPN, as the Blues won 4-0 against the Ottawa Senators, a game that represented a lot of what this team has become under Jim Montgomery. Alex, I was somewhat surprised to see this statistic over the weekend. Since Jim Montgomery was hired as the Blues head coach, they are number one in the NHL in goal suppression. In 22 games under Drew Bannister, they were allowing 2.9 goals against per 60 minutes at 5-on-5. That was the 6th most in the NHL. In their games under Montgomery, they were allowing fewer than 2 goals per game at 5-on-5, number 1 in the league. Alex, to you, what is allowing for that? Now, obviously, Saturday was an outlier. They gave up way too many goals, many of which, though, came during special team situations and then an empty netter at the end of the game. But for you, why are they doing so well at 5-on-5 with their defensive prowess?
And just as a side note for that game, too, against Columbus, BK, I would say 3 of those 6 that were given up were more goaltender than defensive breakdown, too. But why? It's because they're limiting the odd man rushes and those breakaway chances that we saw under Drew Bannister. I mean, we had Ben Bishop on the moment Jim Montgomery was hired, and we said, hey, like, what's one thing that you noticed that changed when Jim Montgomery took over in Dallas? And he chuckled and he said, well, I didn't see as many odd man rushes as I was used to. So that's what's changed. There's an understanding of where you need to be and when you need to be there. Like what Jim Montgomery has talked a lot about is, staying above the puck, making sure that you're not flat-footed and that you're always moving. And there have been instances of it and examples since Jim Montgomery has taken over. The one that I can think of was back to that Buffalo Sabres game where Dylan Holloway got beat on a breakaway. Well, how did he get beat? He stopped on a puck and thought he was going to stop it, and instead it turned into an odd man rush the other way. The details, the habits that Jim Montgomery has harped on, those have been very efficient for the Blues. And you said the goal suppression for St. Louis since Jim Montgomery took over. I isolated it to the last 6 games because that's where the offensive outburst has been for the Blues. They've scored 27. They've allowed a total of 22 goals against. So that's a plus 11, or I'm sorry, not 22, 12. So that is a plus 11 goal differential in the last 6 games. They are getting the saves when they need to, i.e. Binnington or Joel Hofer, take the Columbus game out of it. But more than anything, they are defensively structured enough that when the team gets an opportunity to create an offensive zone time, the Blues kill it off immediately and push it up the ice. Special teams is the problem right now.
So I saw 2 quotes in Jeremy Rutherford's story over the weekend that stood out to me, Alex, and I thought both were relevant. The first came from Pavel Buchnevich, and this is in JR's story about the Blues' improvement in goal suppression and what they've been able to do under Jim Montgomery. There's a lot of quotes in there from Monty that are worth your time, but these are the 2 that really stood out to me about one specific aspect. So it comes from Buch. We got clarity on the defensive side. What we're supposed to be doing at center, what's supposed to happen on the wings. When everybody knows what to do, it's easy to play, easy to read from each other, and I think that helps us a lot. The next quote is from Ryan Suter. Quote, everybody is on the same page. Guys are playing the right way. We've understood that the better you defend, the more offense we're going to be able to get, and the less time that we have to spend in our own end. We've been really good at limiting those times when the defense gets hemmed in, and if they do happen, we keep everybody on the outside and live to fight another day, end quote. Alex, what they're really saying is we have structure. Like, we have figured out how to play within a structure that works for us. And this is not meant to be like this biting criticism of Drew Bannister. But I think it's becoming clear the further that we get into the season that while Bannister may one day be a really good NHL coach, he was not there right now. And what Doug Armstrong said in his press conference was valid, I believe, as a criticism of what happened under Bannister. Like, this is not a team that can continue learning with their head coach if they planned to be a contender this year. And what you have under Jim Montgomery is a guy that just knows what to do at the NHL level, man. He knows what works at this level, especially when it comes to the defensive structure. And I think we're seeing the results of that right now. So to me, like, those comments from Booch and Suter, they say it all. They know what to do at wing. They know what to do at center. Suter says, hey, defensively, like, we're on the same page. Them saying that now means it wasn't happening earlier in the season, and that's coaching. That's just the realities. Like, they went from a guy that was learning on the job at the NHL level, who may one day be a good NHL coach, but isn't yet, to having, if you don't think he's an elite head coach, he's pretty damn close. And that's where the Blues are at.
Well, it's puck support. I mean, Ryan Suter's comment struck me the most. Like, defensive, you kind of trust the guys that you're out there with. Why? Because when one guy tries to do something, the other one can cover for him, to where if you don't understand what you're doing on the ice, then there's no responsibility from the group as a five. And I know this is going to sound bad, but this is just the way the NHL is. Yes, Jim Montgomery knows what he's doing, BK, but the players are listening to Jim Montgomery. And I don't know everything that went on in the locker room and in the video sessions, but I've heard Jim Montgomery and players reference 5 or 6 times that those video sessions, every single player is glued to what Jim Montgomery is saying, and they're taking it and implementing it on the ice. I do know for a fact, I've talked to a couple of players that have discussed how in practice, the details Jim Montgomery harps on. One thing that he wants to see fixed by a player, they'll do it right, and then Jim Montgomery will say, that was great, do that again, and again, and again, and again. For people that have seen Herb Brooks in the movie Miracle, it's the whistle, again, again. That's what Jim Montgomery's doing. So, yes, Jim Montgomery's details are probably top-notch in the NHL, but the players are listening to it, and it sucks if Drew Bannister's saying the same thing and they're not listening to it, but welcome to the NHL. But Jim Montgomery has the group's ear, and that's the same thing that happened when it went from Davis Payne to Ken Hitchcock. Payne was talking, they weren't listening, Ken Hitchcock steps in, they turned it around, and they found a way to implement the details that he was focusing in on.
I guess the question, Alex, is this the new coach bump, or is this sustainable? Like, because I'll answer it first for me. I think the new coach bump was the offense that we saw early on under them. It was, all right, they're playing with the jump. They're getting up. They're getting going. Like, they're seeing the finishing. All of that is taking place. To me, that was the new coach bump. And what you're seeing now is what we talked about at the time. Like, okay, this has got to wear off eventually. Is the defensive structure going to come into place to where that sustains it? And now I think we're starting to see that, okay, the defensive structure is there, and the goal, not the goal suppression, but the goal scoring is what's going to elevate you to your ceiling. That's how I view it. How do you view it? Do you think that this is a new coach bump situation, or are we seeing the structure start to be put into place that is sustainable in your mind?
This is all the structure, BK. 2010 to 2011, the Blues allowed the 10th most goals in the National Hockey League per game. Ken Hitchcock took over in the 2011-2012 season, and he was there for 6 years, I believe it was. The Blues in that 6-year stretch were the second best team defensively in terms of goal suppression. This isn't a new coach bump under Jim Montgomery. This is a group of players that understand the details that are needed to win a hockey game. And here's also why I don't believe it's a new coach bump. Because he's instilling that in a dual group of roster players that are teaching the younger guys that are going to be the next core. Braden Shen, Ryan Suter, Colton Parayko, those guys are the voices. Then they take that and establish what Jim Montgomery's trying to do for guys like Robert Thomas and Jake Neighbors and Kyrou and Zach Bolduc. And then when the Snuggeruds and Dvorskys are there, the core group already knows what details lead to success in the National Hockey League. So, no, the offense might have been a new coach bump. Defensively, you're seeing what the next however many years Jim Montgomery is going to be here, 5+ years is going to be for St. Louis.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. You guys can always check us out on YouTube as well at youtube.com/101ESPN-STL. And if you guys have missed anything from today's show, be sure to check it out on the podcast page after the show today. It's all presented by
Schaefer Door Company.
You can also find that on the 101 ESPN app, and that app is presented by Dobbs Tire and Auto Center. It is free to use. It is free to add to your phone. It is easy to use. You can check that out again. 101 ESPN app. That is where the podcast can be found after each and every show. Coming up next, it's time for the junk drawer here on BK and Ferrario. Alex, when I bet, I want to win the most money possible, and the place to do so is at Circus Sports in the state of Illinois. You download the app today. You've got your betting needs ready to go for you whenever we're getting into this year's NFL playoffs. I'm putting down a 6-leg parlay. I'm betting every game of this weekend's wild card. This is Alex's name written all over for you. Because when I say, Alex, hey, minus 110 splits, what does that mean? Okay, well, when I bet on the Chargers, the Ravens, the Bills, the Packers, the Commanders, and the Rams, and I'm betting on them against the spread, all of those teams against the spread. Over on Circa, I bet $10 on that wager, and I win $496 if I get them all right. If I make that exact same bet over on FanDuel, it's $445. It's a $50 better payout with the exact same picks when I bet it on Circa. This is why we bet exclusively with the Circa Sports app in Illinois.
You're not getting limited on those big parlays, and why should you? You should bring in the most money possible when you put together a six-legger. So do that, those tight money line splits, plus you get incredible customer service over at Circa Sports. You're always dealing with somebody, not just a robot. Download the app today, get ready for Wild Card Weekend, and make those bets with BK and Ferrario on Circa Sports, Illinois. If you or someone you know may have a problem with gambling, call 1-800-GAMBLER or text ILGAMB to 833-234.
Let's open it up. The Junk Drawer with BK and Ferrario.
All right, it's time for the Junk Drawer here on BK and Ferrario with Alex and T-Bone on BK. If you missed any of our show today, you might not know. We are broadcasting live from our houses today for the most part. Alex is at his home. I'm at my home. T-Bone got a hotel last night.
He's at his home.
Yeah, he was staying right over by the studio, so he was able to get in today. T-Bone, I'm curious, did you walk to the studio today? How did this all work out?
Yeah, so I was at the hotel next door, and so I drove through the big storm yesterday, which let me tell you, I hope nobody did that because that was quite the adventure. And I checked in, took all my stuff to the room, and I said, you know what, I'm not going to waste my time of cleaning off the car again, since it's just right next door. So I took the car, somehow got it back to the parking garage here, parked it, and then just walked to the hotel. Got up this morning, checked out, had my suitcase with me, and just walked back to the car in the parking garage, dumped it off, and then came into the building today like a champion.
You know what, T-Bone? This works out perfect because you're the elder statesman at the studio, meaning we think you're like 90 years old, and now you could pull the phrase to every single person that works in that building. Boy, when I was your age, I walked half a mile to the studio in a snowstorm.
Yeah, that's right. I can start saying it. And let me tell you, there were some spots where I took a step and I was like, oh, that feels kind of vroom, and then went sliding right into like 8 inches of snow.
Alex, when you were younger, what was your go-to like snow day activity? We lived right by a little pond. We had our backyard, and then we backed up to a pond, and then we had a little hill over onto the side. So we were stupid because we were kids, right? During the day, we would go over to that hill and we would sled down all day long, and eventually the tracks would take you right over onto the pond, so you'd be sledding into a pond. It was a 50-50 proposition of if it's still frozen in that exact spot or not. But what was your go-to?
Oh, man, so I grew up on the hill when I was young, so every single snow day, but typically it was the night before when we knew we were off school. My dad would get me and my sister. We would either go to Art Hill, which everybody in St. Louis goes to Art Hill, or there was a really nice hill at Carondelet Park, and we would go at 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night, and we would just go and sled in that fresh snow, and it was so much fun. And then as I got older, like high school, me and my buddies would always, in the bad snowstorms when they would tell you don't go on the roads, we would be stupid and we would drive to one of those hockey rinks in Forest Park area, and we would just go out there and play stick and puck hockey for a couple of hours into the night. Yeah, it was fun, man.
I like that. We had a kind of the same situation. We had there's a lake not too far from our house, so you could kind of drive up, and there's a hill that on the left is the lake, and then on the right is just a big hill, so you could go kind of sledding down that. We would also have snowball fights in the yard if you could compact the snow. This is perfect snowball weather, by the way, right now. And then every now and then, if it did get super cold, a buddy of mine did have a pond, and if it would freeze over enough, we would play hockey on it, but we didn't have skates, so we would run on it with our shoes, and we could only play for maybe an hour before you started to lose feeling in your feet because we were wearing tennis shoes on ice trying to play hockey.
BK, I don't know if this happened to you yesterday or not, but of course, the girls wanted to go play outside in the snow, and so as it got a little bit later, we were like, all right, cool, let's go outside. We got a little sled that you just put my daughter in and you just pull her around on. Yeah. And my daughter just wanted me to keep running with her in the backyard. And so, for the first 10, 15 minutes, I was good. Dude, I have never realized more that I'm out of shape than about 15 minutes into that, because she wanted me to keep pulling her, and I was like heaved over on the ground, dry heaving, being like, oh, God, Daddy's out of shape. I can't do it anymore.
I did that a couple of weeks ago when we had the when we had the smaller snowstorm that was like more manageable. I took Luca out and we did the same thing with the sled. You're pulling around or whatnot. And he does like the sign language for again right now. And he just did it every time we got to the bottom. There was like a 0-second split between when he gets to the bottom and stops and we're going again. So we kept going again. I was a disaster
gassed.
by the end of it. Completely gassed. It was game over for me. And I'm somebody that runs like 5 to 6 days a week. So it hits a little different when you're doing stuff like that. We're going out, I think, at some point this afternoon probably to see kind of how he responds to this one.
I got to go shovel the driveway, so I'm going to get my oldest Adelaide to go with us. But what was so funny about it, too, is you know how wives are, BK. My wife is this way. She layers them up to make sure that there is not 1 inch of their skin that is going to feel cold.
They look like the Michelin Man.
My 2-year-old, no joke, she stood like this, and she couldn't move her legs, arms, or head. And so when I put her outside in the snow, I had her take a picture, and so she's like this. And then about 2 seconds later, she tipped over and just laid and couldn't move and just started screaming. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Hope you enjoyed snow day.
All right, he's Alex. That's T-Bone. I'm BK. Hope you guys are enjoying your snow day and staying safe out there as well. We are broadcasting from home. Alex and I are. T-Bone back in the studio for us today. If you guys want to get involved in the show, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service X line to do so. You can always check us out on YouTube as well, youtube.com/101ESPN-STL. It's 102, your time check, brought to you by Clarkson Jewelers, an officially licensed Rolex jeweler. Coming up next, how much influence does this weekend have on some of the quarterbacks' futures that are potentially going to be playing in it? We'll talk about that here on BK and Ferrario.
to more of it. It's BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN.
Sam Darnold have gone through this magical season with a live-in-the-moment philosophy. Along the way, though, Darnold has played so well that the Vikings have to consider all their options after his one-year contract is up, including potentially doing a new deal or using the franchise tag, which is projected to be worth a little under $40 million in 2025. Regardless, there is no reason for the Vikings to consider trading their first-round pick, J.J. McCarthy, a young player that they really like. He's missed his entire rookie season following knee surgery. That's a lot of missed reps. It's going to take him time to get back up to speed. And frankly, Sam Darnold in this season is a tough act to follow.
That's what it sounded like on NFL Network as Tom Pelissero is reporting what the plans are for the Vikings this offseason. It's a good problem to have, Alex, but a problem nonetheless. What do you do with Sam Darnold when he's going to be making $45+ million heading into next season, whether it's with Minnesota or elsewhere? That's one situation worth monitoring going into next week. His future, I believe, at least in part, hinges on his performance against the LA Rams in the first round of the playoffs. It is not, to me, the only one that deserves some monitoring. The Steelers are not playing their best football at the right time, once again. Russell Wilson, when he got in there, we said earlier this season, not sure I totally understand the move. And then you saw it and you're like, okay, this makes sense to me. I understand why they went to Russ over Justin Fields. He played well. He added an element to the offense that they did not have previously. But over the last month or so, we've seen the warts of what Russell Wilson brings to the offense, especially the past 2 weeks in his handling of late game situations. That handling of the situation on Saturday against the Ravens, just a total disaster, man. An absolute... Yeah, against the Bengals, sorry, not the Ravens. Just an abject failure by Russell Wilson. The play where he ended up getting tackled instead of, he thought he was going to be able to get to the edge, and then he was like, oh no, I'm not going to be able to. He took it back. He was like, all right, I'm going to have to find somebody down the field, and it was just too late. It just feels like his brain is not processing things at his current age. So I think that's another one that's worth monitoring. Alex, for you, as we go into Wild Card Weekend, for the teams that remain, are there any other situations that you think are worthy of monitoring? Whether it's a head coach, a quarterback, other players in particular, who are you keeping an eye on with the now developed full playoff field?
You know, I really don't think there's many others that stick out to me. Like, I could look at, you know, the Houston Texans, but I don't think they're going to do anything with their quarterback or their head coach. It's just a bad season for them. You go to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I don't think Todd Bowles is that good, but they obviously like him, and they make the playoffs consistently. So do they do something there if they get bounced in the first round? Probably not. I think you listed the only two guys, and for me, I think both teams probably already have their minds made up. Like, if I'm the Steelers, I'm stuck. Like, I got Russell Wilson. I got Justin Fields. I'm not drafting a quarterback. I'm not going to go pay one of these guys. So this is my situation I'm in, which is more the reason why I'm not moving on from Mike Tomlin or trading him if I'm the Pittsburgh Steelers, because I don't have any better options right now. But if I'm the Minnesota Vikings, and this just might be me because I don't like Sam Darnold, if I'm the Vikings, I'm not bringing Sam Darnold back unless he gets me to the Super Bowl. I just witnessed last night why I'm not going to pay Sam Darnold $30+ million to be my number one guy. He crumbles in big game situations. And if I pay him all of that money, my roster around him is going to get worse. So is this a quarterback that can take my team to the next level when other areas of the team underwhelm? I don't think so. So I would much rather go with the J.J. McCarthy, who obviously they have high expectations for because they drafted him with the first-round pick. And then I allocate the money that I was going to give to Sam Darnold to other situations on my roster. So I think the mind's made up for both of those teams with pressure. One stuck and the other has to move on from their quarterback.
Yeah, I think both those, to me, the jury is still out. I actually lean towards the Vikings bringing back Darnold, but it'd be on the tag, not on a contract extension. Mostly just because, man, you have no idea what J.J. McCarthy is. You can like him all you want. You could have loved what he did at the Combine. Let's be honest. The odds of him leading the Vikings to 14-2 are very slim. The fact that people think that he could put up what Darnold did this year, call me skeptical because I've never seen it, And at Michigan, it's not like he was the guy that carried Michigan to that title game. That was Harbaugh running the football down their throat and having an excellent defense. Not once in Michigan's run 2 years ago, or last year, did I ever say, man, J.J. McCarthy, he's the reason why they're winning this championship. So, to me, Darnold's locked back in on that roster. It's just a matter of if he's going to get the big contract or not. I think you're stuck with Russ if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers. The other one that I would throw out here as I'm monitoring it would be Nick Sirianni as the head coach of the Eagles. If they lose to the Green Bay Packers, I can totally see where the Eagles say, you know what, he's not the guy for us. We had arguably the most pure talented roster in the NFL. For the most part, they're pretty healthy going into that playoff game against the Packers. They end up losing that game to Green Bay, a team that they beat in week 1 of the season. Yeah, I can see where the Eagles look at it and say, you know what, let's move on from Nick Sirianni. Let's see if we can bring somebody else in.
Real quick, BK, because T-Bone brought up Sirianni, if you're the Eagles and you do decide to do that, if you get bounced in the first round, do you look at Ben Johnson?
I think I'm looking at Vrabel there.
Yeah.
I think he would be the guy that I'm making the move for. And the reason why is...
What if he's not, though? And what if Vrabel goes to the Patriots? Is it Sirianni or Ben Johnson?
I mean, in that scenario, I think Sirianni did a pretty good job this year. Now, ultimately, it comes down to the coach-quarterback relationship, and I know there was a lot that came out before this season about how they had a terrible working relationship and they didn't talk to each other last year. If that hasn't been fixed, then you probably have to fire him because Jalen Hurts is your long-term solution at the quarterback position there, unless they're going to make an even more dramatic change. But I don't foresee that. So if that's broken, we don't know that on the outside looking in, then yeah, you make the switch and you go to Ben Johnson and you go about it that way. But Ben Johnson's still an unknown, man. And for all of my faults with Nick Sirianni, and I think there are some, he did a pretty good job this year. And at a certain point, you have to give. I wouldn't fire him necessarily just to go out there and get a guy that's another unknown. If I'm firing him, it's to get somebody that I think is going. It's somebody that I know is a good, capable this offseason is Mike Vrabel to me.
Yeah, that's how I would look at it as well. I think if you're going to have somebody where you move on from Sirianni, it would be a well-known coach. It would be Vrabel. I know Pete Carroll's name's been kind of floating out there a little bit as well. I mean, he's older, so I don't know if I'd go that route, but it would have to be something like that, where I would look at them and say, okay, if we're going to move on, we need to make sure that we get somebody that has proven experience. Otherwise, this could go south even further because we've talked about this before with coaches, it's not always greener on the other side. So I would make sure that if I make that move, it's got to be a guy that's a proven winner, I would say, to take over as the head coach.
So the other thing that I wanted to get to, Alex, on this one, that's the head coaching side of things, right? Sirianni would be the big change that you would have to make. I do think it's worth noting that some of these teams could potentially have some significant offensive coordinator or defensive coordinator changes coming out of this season. Look at the Detroit Lions, for example, right? Earlier today, now this would not be the wild card thing. This is obviously a team that's already got a bye into the divisional round. But I said earlier today that the Lions have a 2-year window, and I believe that to be true. But it's worth noting that they might lose both of their coordinators after this season. Aaron Glenn is one of the top coaching candidates this offseason, and it sounds like he is the favorite to land the New Orleans Saints job. Ben Johnson is one of the top candidates as well, and it sounds like this is the year that he probably takes another job elsewhere. That has a huge effect on what people will think of the Lions heading into 2025. You look at a team like the Broncos. Their defense is the overwhelming reason why they are where they are right now. And their defensive coordinator is one of the top candidates on the market going into this offseason. Liam Cohen, the offensive coordinator for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They already lost their OC last year, and now they might be replacing him again if Liam Cohen gets one of these jobs. It's not going to be an easy thing to do. Cliff Kingsbury with the Washington Commanders is now coming up as a potential candidate for some of these jobs as well. So it's worth noting that some of these teams, this could be their best chance because of the window that they have with their coaching, not just the window that they have with their players. And a lot of that will change over the next 3 weeks to a month, depending on where teams decide to go with this coaching cycle.
Yeah, and I think you nailed it. I think your best example is the Detroit Lions, because this is a team that I think has elite playmakers at pretty much every position. A couple of them won't be playing in the playoffs because of their injuries on the defensive side, but they've got everything. I love Dan Campbell. I love the aggressiveness, and I think he's a coach that can be the perfect motivator. The question, though, is how do you recoup the talent that you had in terms of those coordinators, and we've seen that completely blow up some teams in the past, which is why it's so disappointing that these injuries have taken place for the Detroit Lions this year, because, man, you have these guys healthy, and I think everybody's talking about Detroit being a Super Bowl favorite, but like you look around at some of these other teams, I don't know if you see as much turnover as you do with that Detroit Lions team. So they're kind of the one that you look at the most in terms of a pivotal situation this year for the postseason.
Yeah, and it's worth noting, if I'm not mistaken, I think these are the original coordinators under Dan Campbell with the Lions, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Like, I think these are the guys that he hired when he got there. Now, he deserves credit for that. He clearly found the right guys. Like, he did a good job of identifying, okay, here's who my first staff will include, and they're going to be really good coaches that are going to grow with me in our time in Detroit. He deserves all the credit in the world for that. But it's one thing to be able to identify those guys on your initial staff. It's another thing entirely to be able to go out there and do it again and again and again. The best head coaches in the NFL have done a really good job of replacing coordinators on either side of the ball. It's something that Sean McVay has been really good at. It's something that Kyle Shanahan has been really good at. Andy Reid has done a really good job with that. It's something that even really good coaches like Bill Belichick at times have struggled with, is to find, okay, I've got one guy, Josh McDaniels, who's a really good offensive coordinator. Anytime he tried to replace him, it went poorly in New England. So it's not like a huge slight to Dan Campbell to say, hey, we don't know what your replacements are going to look like. It's not an easy thing to do. So that's just something to keep in mind as you're watching these games over the course of the postseason is, okay, this is the version of this team with that guy as the coordinator. If that guy leaves, what does that mean for them long term? For some of these teams, it's going to be their best chance to be able to win, given the window that they're in right now. All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. Coming up next, we'll play a game of in or out here on BK and Ferrario.
on 101 ESPN. Come on, man. Are you in or are you out? It's in or out with BK and Ferrario.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for in or out. You guys give us a scenario. We will tell you if we are in or out here on BK and Ferrario. Guys, let's start out with this. In or out, Nolan Arenado will be traded to the Boston Red Sox by the end of the offseason.
Out. I think they go Bregman. I don't think they go after Nolan Arenado. I think Nolan Arenado's made it known that that's okay. That's an okay spot for him. I don't know if the Boston Red Sox are going to be as interested as we think they will be, so I'm out.
I'm out as well. I think this report was, hey, Nolan wants to be a Red Sox. Meanwhile, the Red Sox are like, well, that's cool and all, but, we don't want the Nolan Arenado experience, his 3 years and like $60 million. So I'm out. I think he's going to be a St. Louis Cardinal by the time we get to opening day.
Same.
Man, I'm out. I'm still going to stick with my previous prediction that he ends up on the Angels. I think what probably happens to what T-Bone said, where it's like, okay, the Red Sox end up with like Alex Bregman, and that's their answer at third base. The Astros were already a no. The Dodgers are a no. Okay, so where you going, Nolan? You can either stay here or you can go to the Angels, and I think eventually he's like, all right, I'll just go home, because clearly this is not the situation for me, and if I'm going to have to choose somewhere, I might as well go home, which is L.A. So I'll say out, and he ends up still going to the L.A. Angels. Alex, what do you have for us today?
Guys, in or out, 15 games between now and the Four Nations break in the NHL for St. Louis. In or out, the Blues will pick up points in 13 of those 15 games.
Oh, out. That's too many.
I was looking at this one, so this is, we all think 96 points probably gets the team into the playoffs, right?
Yeah, probably.
So 15 games, this next 15 stretch, 10-2-3. This has got to be their like winning stretch of hockey, which they got bad teams, all possibility. And then in the final 26, they go 14-9-3. That would put them at 96 points, play about 500 hockey in the final 26 games of the season. Man, 10-2-3 is kind of a record that I'm going to be looking at for what they do this stretch. Very possible to pick up points in 13 of 15, because the only few that I look at is, I don't know if you can get any, Colorado, Florida, and Edmonton. Everything else, man, you're either in the same conversation as these teams or you're worse than them.
Yeah, I am out. I don't think they're capable of that kind of a stretch. What, 10-2-3 is what you said?
10-2-3. Yep.
This is a 500 hockey team. Like, I think they're not even going to win 3 in a row this season. Like, I just can't see them putting together this kind of a stretch of hockey that we're talking about. So 500 teams, look, they beat some teams and surprise you, but they also lose teams they shouldn't. As I look at when they lost to Buffalo, when I look, Columbus is a little bit ahead of schedule, but even then, like, Columbus shouldn't be a team that puts 6 goals on the board on you. So I'm out. I don't think they can play that kind of stretch of hockey at any point this season. Guys, in or out, Dylan Holloway, who currently is second on the Blues in goals with 14, will finish second on the team in goals by the end of the season.
I'm going to say in on this one. Alex, I want to get your thoughts on it. I'm curious where you stand. He's second on the team in goals, and third is Jake Neighbors, interestingly enough. Booch is now fourth on the team with 9 goals on the season. Booch would have been my pick to potentially overtake him. He's the one guy that I think is capable of doing that, but he's too far back. He's 5 goals behind Dylan Holloway at this point. So I'll say in. I think Dylan Holloway finishes second on the team in goal scoring.
I'm going to say out. I think he finishes third, because I think 1-2 will be Kyrou and Robert Thomas. I think Robert Thomas is going to go on a little bit of a stretch in this month of where he starts seeing a lot more goals pile up.
I'm in. I think Holloway's going to finish second on the team. Be Kyrou 1, him 2. I just don't know if Neighbors will get to Holloway's spot, because I think Holloway's probably going to be 25 to 30. I don't know if Neighbors can catch up to that. Neighbors, to me, is going to be in that 20-goal range. So I think it's going to be Holloway. I think Booch got kind of held back from when he was playing that center spot, to where I don't know if he'll be able to go on a hot streak and catch up to it.
All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for in or out. You guys give us a scenario. We will tell you if we are in or out here on BK and Ferrario. Let's get to this from Swayze here on the text line. Guys, in or out? At least one of the Lions or Eagles will fail to make it to the NFC Championship game. One of them will lose prior to the NFC Championship game. In or out?
I'll say in, because I don't trust the Eagles. I mean, we all have said the same thing about the Lions, but I think the Lions offense can do it. I don't think the Eagles offense can do it, and that means your defense has to put up points or find a way to limit the other side. So I'm in. I think the Eagles fail.
T-Bone, you know my stance on the Packers, so I'm going to say that the Eagles fail to make it to the NFC Championship game because they're going to lose in the first round to the Green Bay Packers, so I'm in.
That's not happening.
I will say in, but mine's more concerned for the Lions. I said this in our open. I don't think last night's game told us anything about the Lions' defense. Outside, they did have a good game plan against Sam Darnold. I don't know if you can continuously do that in the playoffs and slow down all these good quarterbacks enough. I think that was more about Sam Darnold. So I think the Lions are the team for me. I think they're going to be an upset watch. I think if they run into the Commanders or potentially the Rams in that second round matchup, their first playoff game, I think they could lose that game at home. So I'm going to say in.
All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line from the 828. Guys, in or out, Tyreek Hill goes back to Kansas City via trade this offseason. I'm out. It's not happening. The Chiefs have moved on. Tyreek has moved on. He had his chance to be able to secure his legacy with the Kansas City Chiefs. I do not think that is something that will be taking place.
Yeah, I'm out too. I think the Chiefs are probably good in the situation of wide receivers right now. I mean, Rashee Rice has been out this whole season, so I think they're good in that area, and I don't think you don't want that soap opera back on your team right now.
Yeah, I'm out as well. I think they've got the guys in place, and he's only getting older. Tyreek Hill is only going to he's getting close, if he hasn't already, to really start going downhill, so I'm out on this.
All right, next one up here. I like this one, Alex. It's something we've talked about in the past. T-Bone has never mentioned this man, but I certainly have on our show. In or out, the Blues will acquire Michael Granlund from the San Jose Sharks as they continue their playoff push.
First off, this is ridiculous because I brought him up while somebody was drinking a martini in Mexico. I am going to say in. I think they should acquire him. I've had him on my radar since that vacation of BK's because he makes all the sense in the world, right? He's a rental, doesn't block Dvorsky, while also improving the team this year to make it to the playoffs.
I am so far out on this one. One, this is going to be the guy that everybody's competing for because the list of available players isn't that great, and he's going to probably cost you a couple of draft picks, which I don't know if people realize this. Blues don't have any in this upcoming draft. And two, have you guys seen what Mikel Granlund's done over these last 10 games with the San Jose Sharks? Now, look, granted, bad San Jose Sharks team, I understand. Although San Jose's played some decent hockey, Granlund in his last 10 games has 3 points and is at a -4. And on top of that, his faceoff numbers have been fine. He's had 3 of those 10 games where he's been 4 of those 10 games which he's been above 50%, and the rest he's been below 50%, with 3 of them being less than 25%. I'd rather just keep Braden Shen in that position. Shen's been fine until Dvorsky's ready, so I'm out on this.
Yeah, I'm in. I think this would be a great move for the St. Louis Blues because I'm looking at more than just the 10-game sample size. Over the course of the entirety of the season, 35 points in 40 games. Yes, he is a -4 on the ice. It's honestly a minor miracle that he is only a -4 on the ice for that specific team with what they've been able to do this year. I think he is exactly what this team is missing. Now, I think there are fair questions. Alex's point that I agree with the most is you're going to have to give up real valuable assets to be able to get a player like this. This is a consistent 50 to 60 point producer year over year. He's going to be 33 years old next season. If I'm not mistaken, he's on an expiring deal. So this is like the classic acquire at the deadline type of a player. He would be first on the Blues in points this year if he were a St. Louis Blue. I don't expect that to be the case when he's traded to a team that has better players. I think he will take a step back in terms of his point production. Somebody's got to score on that team, but his 11 goals would also be third on the team. It would basically be right there with Jake Neighbor. So I think it would be a great move. It really just comes down to cost to acquire for me.
Man, what number would you think he's going to have so I can get my jersey ready right now? Nobody gonna.
I think he'll probably go with 64, considering that's the only number that he's had in his entire NHL career.
It's not going to happen, so I wouldn't worry about getting a jersey, T-Bone.
Nah, it'll be even more valuable if he never plays for the Blues.
Yeah. Well, very true, very true. You can trade that online, T-Bone.
All right, last thing here. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service X line from the 479. In or out, the Cardinals will not make a single free agent signing this offseason.
I'll say I'll say out. I think they're going to sign somebody. It's just going to be a lower name that nobody gets excited about, but it's going to be a bullpen guy. It's going to be somebody that they can throw into it, honestly, an Andrew Kittredge, something like that. Maybe Andrew Kittredge again. But they're going to sign somebody. It's just not going to be until towards the end of the offseason, and it's going to be somebody that you probably don't even see the news that they signed.
Yeah, I would say they will sign somebody. I think they will spend $10 million this offseason. It's probably going to be a one-year deal anywhere between $5 and $10 million. And I think Alex is right. It's probably going to be for a veteran reliever that can come in and take the Andrew Kittredge role to kind of pair up with Ryan Helsley. And then you can potentially trade that guy at the trade deadline because he's on a one-year deal and bullpen arms are such a hot commodity at the deadline.
That's where I'm at, too. I think they'll get one player that they bring in. There was a really good piece by Derek Gould in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch today, kind of breaking down some potential options for them this offseason. He broke down the top 5 choices in his mind. One of them was like Jose Leclerc, former Rangers reliever, Spencer Turnbull. I think he would be a great fit for the Cardinals. Nicky Lopez was one that he brought up. That's something that I don't think makes a lot of sense for them. I don't think they need a utility guy. He brought up Kyle Gibson, and then David Robertson is another one that he brought up, who I think that would be a really good signing. That could be similar for them to like what the Royals did last year with Aroldis Chapman, where he's a reliever that you could potentially flip at the deadline. So those are the kind of names that I think make some sense. I like the idea of getting a high upside reliever or a swingman that can potentially add a little bit of stability to that rotation as well. So that would be the way that I would go about it. All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. You can always check us out on YouTube at youtube.com/101ESPN STL. Coming up next, how should the Blues capitalize on their impressive showing in the World Juniors? What does this mean for their future? We'll talk about it next year on 101 ESPN.
Tanner Hendrickson here with a Sports Center update brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. Blues fell the Columbus Blue Jackets over the weekend. They'll be back in action tomorrow night as they visit the Minnesota Wild. We'll have pregame coverage starting at 6 o'clock with Alex Ferrario. Then puck drop at 7 o'clock with the voice of the Blues, Chris Kerber. The Sports Center update is brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, an independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
101 ESPN.
Alex, the Blues had 9 different players participating in this year's World Juniors. It felt like any time that you would turn a game on, you'd see at least a player or two on that respective team. Team USA ultimately came home with the gold once again for the second consecutive season. Alongside Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. We are broadcasting from home. Alex and I are today. T-Bone holding it down for us back in the studio. Hope you all are being very safe out there. Alex, when you have a tournament like this, a franchise record, 9 players participating, it begs the obvious question, which is, what does this mean for the Blues' future? Because you can't have all 9 of those guys immediately becoming a part of your future for this team. So how do they handle this, Alex? How do they capitalize on their impressive showing this year in the World Juniors?
I think you start looking at these guys and try and plot out future-wise what they're going to be for your team. If anything stuck out to me at this World Juniors, one, it's Dalibor Dvorsky's performance. I think that guy looks like a top 6 player, which is great for this Blues team. But there's a lot of people talking about Jakub Stancil and Juraj Pekarčík and a couple of these Otto Stenberg and Theo Lindstein. You've got a lot of good pieces. And by good pieces, I mean middle 6 forwards that can be goal scorers for you. Here's the thing. Those guys all don't make it to the NHL, and frankly, there's not enough spots for those guys to make it to the NHL. So those pieces, in my opinion, either the start of this offseason or by next trade deadline, are going to be trade assets for the Blues. And what the next 6 months are going to be, the Blues looking at them and saying, okay, how do they fit into our future plans 2-3 years from now? Where do they fit in for our squad? If you look at Doug Armstrong's past history, guys, he is not afraid to pull the trigger quickly on prospects that have high upside that don't fit into the plans of the Blues. David Rundblad back in 2009, that was a guy that was flipped the year after he was traded for a draft pick to draft Vladimir Tarasenko. If you go forward a little bit more, Tage Thompson was traded a couple of years, if not 1 year after he was drafted, so that they could bring in Ryan O'Reilly. That was 3 years after, by the way. Dominic Bach, a guy that they drafted 25th overall, was traded the next offseason to go get Justin Falk for a team that they were trying to still win with. So I think guys like Stancil, Pekarčík, Stenberg, even an NHL player right now like Zach Bolduc, I think those guys are all in the same criteria of middle 6 forwards that can score goals for us and be good complementary pieces. How does it look 2 to 3 years from now? Because if you don't fit into the Blues' plans, I could see Doug Armstrong pulling the trigger on a couple of those guys to go get a guy that fits into your top 6 right now.
Man, that's how I see it as well. And T-Bone, I think we're all on the same page of this. Like, even with a Zach Bolduc, who I think he could be a 15 to 20 goal scorer long term for the Blues if they want to keep him here. And I really like him on a personal level as well. We've had a number of good conversations with Bolduc. Like, I'd have no problem with them keeping him. But if this team, and at every turn they've told us this with both their actions and their words, if they truly view themselves as a contender this season, I think some of these guys might be trade bait at the deadline. Like, forget looking forward, where I definitely think some of them will be utilized via trades, like this offseason, for example. I think at this year's trade deadline, if the Blues decide we don't want to include picks, because Alex, you mentioned in the Granlund discussion, they don't have a lot of the future. What if another team, specifically like the Sharks, who don't want to have a pick that's going to help them 3 years from now, they'd like to start getting better sooner, maybe they value Zach Bolduc more than they would value a mid-first round pick or a second round pick. And so maybe if you're the Blues, you say, okay, well, we've got Michael Granlund. He can help us right now. That spot in our lineup where Zach Bolduc previously played, we'll just move somebody that was otherwise already in the lineup to that spot. Like, hell, Joseph can just play in that spot night to night, and we've upgraded the top 9 accordingly. That's the kind of thing that I think they have the potential to do because of the depth of their prospects.
Hey, I wouldn't do that one, and I know I've just said, like, trade Zach Bolduc. I don't think they do that at this year's deadline. I think if they bring somebody in, it's going to be for somebody that we haven't really heard of, or it's going to be for draft picks to help now. But that's only going to be if this team plays well in the month of January. If they go sub 500 in January, they're going to be trading away pieces rather than bringing pieces in. What I think could happen on the Bolduc front is in the offseason. I don't think you trade some of these assets, and even Doug Armstrong has said, like, we're not in the business right now of trading out pieces that we believe are part of our future because they're trying to figure out what they are. The offseason where you could go out there and get yourself another piece that is going to be here long term for what the future looks like. And I don't have a player, for example, to you because I don't know, frankly, what those look like. Does Brady Tkachuk become available this offseason because Ottawa misses the postseason? Does Mitch Marner become available via free agency and you want to trade for him before he hits free agency? That's to be determined. But I think the offseason is where you start really considering it. I don't know if I would do that for a rental piece now. I got to wait and see what that full season looks like for those players.
That's a fair point, especially on the rental side of it. Like, if I guess it really just comes down to how do they value Zach Bolduc? Like, if they traded Zach Bolduc for a draft pick, what do you think they would get in return, Alex?
Probably a second-round pick. I don't think they're going
to do that, but just to assess the value of that player. I think that's probably right, like a pretty decent second-round pick.
Yeah.
And if that's how you value him, what do you think Michael Granlund will get this year at the deadline? Like, if he ends up getting traded, do you think it'll be second-round pick?
Probably a second and a third, because I think it's going to be a bidding war for him. Because, again, there's not a lot of guys. It's a UFA. Maybe just a second, maybe just a third. But, I mean, if teams get into a competition, why wouldn't somebody up the ante to make sure they go get the UFA? And you know how that goes. Sometimes guys try and re-sign where they're at. I mean, with Bolduc, it's such an interesting thing because it's now, and like you're seeing it at the NHL level, and you're trying to figure out how to adjust it, and it's in and it's out of the lineup. I think I've made this reference in the past, and like by no means do I think they're the same player, but what worries me if you hold on to it too long is it loses some of that trade value, and if he doesn't fit into your plans moving forward, what happens? Like, I don't know if you guys remember Ty Ratty with the NHL. Like, this was a guy who put up 121 points and 110 points in juniors, and he never really made it at the NHL level. I think Bolduc's better than Ty Ratty, but if you hold on to it too long, you know what Ty Ratty was traded for? He was traded in a package to go get Chris Stewart and Kevin Shattenkirk, but he was probably the lower end of that piece. They had to trade a first-round draft pick and Eric Johnson to go get Chris Stewart and Kevin Shattenkirk. So I think the time is going to be in the offseason. When you look at this, you see a full season. You get Snuggerud for a couple of games. You have Jake Neighbors already here. You get Dvorsky. You see what these seasons look like for a couple of these junior players and guys that are playing over in Europe. And then you assess and you say, where do these players fit into our lineup? Not just for next year, but 2 to 3 years from now. Because if Bolduc doesn't fit into where you think a Snuggerud's going to take that spot, or a Dvorsky's going to take that spot, and you believe Stenberg's going to be good for you, and if Bolduc's just okay, do you look at that and say, well, let's see if we could put a couple of okay pieces to go get a guy who's good for us right now?
He's Alex Ferrario. Tanner Hendrickson back in the studio for us today. I'm Brandon Kiley. We're broadcasting remotely because of all the roads out there. Hopefully you guys are staying nice and warm and hopefully very safe by staying off of the roads today. Coming up next, we're going to finish off today's show with the BK and Ferrario Rewind, giving you your thoughts coming off of the week that was in the NFL and our biggest lessons that we learned this week in the NFL. There's one in particular that I learned the hard way. We'll get into that next here on 101 ESPN. If you missed anything from today's show, be sure to check out the podcast page, 101ESPN.com, and the free 101 ESPN app is where you go to find it. It's all presented by
Schaefer Door Company.
That aforementioned 101 ESPN app is also presented by Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers. Be sure to download that today. It is free to use. It is super easy to enjoy. Check it out over there on your app store, wherever that is that you have to go for your phone. All right, Alex, to finish things off today, let's get back to the NFL. It was the final weekend of the NFL season, and frankly, most of the games were horrific, like absolutely horrible. But we did get a crown jewel at the end of the day. It wasn't a close game, but it was one that revealed a lot of things between the Vikings and the Lions. Now, I learned my lessons the hard way. I had the Vikings in our Pick'em Challenge for our show. That didn't go particularly well for me, and we'll talk about that tomorrow. I also had the Vikings in the Fastlane Pick'em Challenge, which it has been announced over on Twitter.
Dude.
We lost this week.
What a terrible stretch by you guys.
Yeah, not good. I'm pretty sure I had the low score in the group once again this week, unfortunately.
Jeez,
I had the Vikings last night. So here's the problem. Going into that game, I was not the lowest score on the team. I was above, I think, two other people in our group. However, I had the Vikings. Here's where it gets interesting. The only way that we could tie, which ultimately won us the Pick'em Challenge yesterday, was if the Vikings won, because I picked the Vikings and nobody else did. So we needed the Vikings in order to just be done with this and not have to go to the fantasy playoffs or to the wild card round for us to be able to get our Pick'em Challenge determined. Well, obviously, we know what the result was. And so I lost our Pick'em Challenge and the Fastlane's Pick'em Challenge because I trusted Sam Bleepin' Darnold, who all year long I said, this is not the guy that you want to trust in a big spot. And then I bought into it, hook, line, and sinker, based on what he did last week. Alex, what did we learn from Sunday Night Football?
Boy, I'm just sorry, man. What kind of game plan is that? Like you're playing Dan Campbell out here going for fourth down, get to the wild card round, and then you try and win it there. Anyway, what did we learn from this one? I think I learned to not trust Sam Darnold. I didn't take anything away from any of the other games, and frankly, the playoffs are going to be a different entity. But my bigger thing is just don't trust Sam Darnold, because there are quarterbacks that can get it done in the postseason, and there are guys that can't get it done in postseason or even big moments. Dak Prescott is one that comes to mind for me, because Dak Prescott, every single season, he's incredible regular season. People are like, oh my gosh, this is the year for the Cowboys. You know what happens in the playoffs? He pees down his leg. That's what Sam Darnold did in a playoff-like game against the Detroit Lions, and I expect the exact same thing when they take on the L.A. Rams, and frankly, I'll be taking the L.A. Rams in that wild card game.
Yeah, for me, it was Sam Darnold's probably not a guy that's going to elevate your roster when it gets to the playoffs, right? You know, you need some quarterbacks to be game managers, but that gets you through the regular season. Once you get to the playoffs, that guy has to be able to elevate his game. We've seen Stafford be able to do that. I trust Stafford and McVay more than I do Sam Darnold, and it makes me worry that the Vikings are going to be a one and done. And I don't know if it's fair to call them a fraudulent team all season long, but I think it now has answered all of our skepticism that we had basically from weeks 1 to 17 of, hey, Sam Darnold, at some point this is going to come crashing down, and that looked like it was last night, and I expect that to continue into the playoffs.
So some of this is like, I thought he was way too amped up yesterday, early in the game, and then he just never found a way to settle himself down before it was too late. And the Lions had a great game plan. I don't think they have a very good defense. Their personnel is just beat up. It's not because they lacked personnel at the beginning of the year. Just, dude, guys are hurt. That happens sometimes. But they had a great game plan. They blitzed the hell out of him. We've seen very few teams try to do that this season, where they just say, all right, we're going to play man-to-man defense. We're going to ask your guys to beat ours, and we're going to make things so difficult for Sam Darnold that he's not going to be able to find them. And that's exactly what happened. So I don't know how many teams can follow or will follow that same formula. I think it is the formula. It's just make him uncomfortable in the pocket. We'll see if the Rams are able to do that. But it is, to me, a sign that, like, no, this was not a fraudulent team at all. Their defense is excellent. They're really well coached. They have excellent wide receivers and really offensive playmakers in general. And Darnold, for the most part this year, was really, really good. But when you have a team that puts together a specific game plan for that game and for that individual, unlike the rest of the year, everything is focused on you. How do we stop you? Not how do we make ourselves the best for the 17-game season? How do we kick your ass in this game? The Lions knew exactly what to do. And that was always my fear, is when the microscope is on him, How will he respond? Yesterday, the answer was poorly. Really poorly. It was his worst game that I've seen him play since that I'm seeing ghost games against the Patriots a few years ago, which was nationally televised. That was always my fear with Darnold, and unfortunately, I bought into him right as it became too late. The clock struck midnight, he turned into a pumpkin again, and it was the exact week that I decided to buy into him. Alex, before we get out of here, as of today, who would be your Super Bowl pick? Who are your two teams that you're taking to get into it? Now that we've seen what the bracket looks like.
I'm going to stick with the Lions. I think the Lions find a way to get to the Super Bowl, and I am going to say the Bills. I don't think the Chiefs do it. I think the Bills are your Super Bowl contender for the AFC, and I think the Bills beat the Lions, and Josh Allen gets his first Super Bowl. I've got Bills winning it as well, and I've got them taking down the Philadelphia Eagles. I don't think the Lions, I think they could be one and done because I fear their defense, so I've got Bills over Eagles.
I am in a really difficult spot right now on the NFC side of things. I have no idea, dude. You could pick anybody and I'd be like, yeah, that makes sense. I could totally understand how you got to that place. Like literally any of the 7 teams that are in, I could understand an argument for them.
All right, Vikings, go.
The Vikings, it's simple. They are the team that they were for the first 16 weeks of the season and not the team that you saw last week. And Sam Darnold will clean things up against the blitz. It was the first time that he's really seen that game plan this year. He'll be better the next time they see it.
Buccaneers, go.
All right. I don't think you believed everything that you just said there.
No, but that is the argument in favor of them. The Chiefs, I think, will come out of the AFC side of things, and on the NFC side, I'll just stick with what my prior was, which is the Green Bay Packers. It's going to be tough, but that'll be my pick. All right, for Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. It sounds like I've got a baby boy that's ready for a nap. We will talk to you guys tomorrow at 11 a.m. The Fast Lane will break things down for you next year on 101 ESPN.